Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Boozer. I'd like to welcome you to today's CUGC User Share, Lab It Up with Citrix Unidesk. Today is a proof of concept and a panel discussion. Really briefly, go over our format. As I mentioned, it's a panel discussion. We'd like to welcome you to type in your questions throughout the presentation today, and make sure you use the question area in the GoToWebinar control panel over to your right, and we'll pay attention to those. Also let you know that the presentation is being recorded and will be posted on mycugc.org soon, probably within the next day or so. With us today, we have quite a panel. We have Rob Zylowski, he's a Senior Solution Architect with Citrix, and Robert Shaw, also a Solution Architect. We have Andy Whiteside with the Charlotte CUGC, and David Ott with the Triad NC CUGC, and I believe Jarian Gibson is going to join us today as well. Andy, hand things over to you to more fully introduce everyone and get things going.
No, that's great. Thanks, Stephanie. So, yeah, I don't know where Jarian's at the moment. He's probably out saving some Citrix environment, knowing him. So he's probably really tied up. But hopefully he'll jump in at some point in time. Jarian is kind of an independent Citrix guru / consultant that many of you guys probably already know, and just really awesome. Just awesome leader in the Citrix community across the board, from a CTP perspective as well as from a Citrix user group perspective. But with us we have the two guys at the top. So we'll go with one being Rob Z, and then the other being Rob S. Those are guys that came over to Citrix as part of the acquisition of Unidesk, which, to be quite honest, up until now, I'm a Citrix guy. I live, sleep, eat it, breathe it. But I've kind of stayed away from Unidesk because I wasn't really sure how it would muddy the waters in terms of my user base, the guys I work with, trying to add yet another technology to this. But I think I always knew it was good stuff, and I always knew it was out there and needed to be part of a Citrix story in a lot of cases. But now that it's part of the Citrix product set, and Rob, you guys can comment on this, I think we don't have a choice, right? I mean, it's just like kind of like NorthScal now. We gotta learn it, we gotta implement it, we gotta see how it works, and decide whether it's going to be part of our Citrix environments that we manage and implement. So Rob Z and Rob S, you guys want to give us a little background on how all this came to be?
Sure. Thanks, Andy. I'm Rob Zylowski. I'm a solution architect at Unidesk, and I guess I've been there for a little over 7 years. And actually, I don't know that everyone has to use it, but I think you'll find it very valuable and worthwhile to use, both for your XenApp and desktop environments as we go forward. I think it came about because Citrix was really looking at a better way to manage the overall environments. They had AppDisk and they had Pbs, and they had issues with both. And they were looking for something that really would offer them the ability to deliver applications in a better way, right? Which is kind of what Unidesk adds to the Citrix portfolio of products.
Can I paraphrase that real quick? Citrix stepped up,
sure.
Right? They saw that this was a need in the community, and like you said, everybody doesn't have to have it, but now that it's part of the product set, everybody on this call that's a Citrix person really needs to understand it completely inside and out, and then make the judgment call whether they need it or not, because it's included. There's no cost to adding this at this point. If you're paying for your Citrix subscriptions, you own this product. So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Rob.
Rob Shaw, anything you want to add? So Rob Shaw and I go way back. Rob used to be a Citrix sales engineer with me on the same team for, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so before he left to go to, I think, Dell Quest type solution. Then he ended up over at Unidesk, and now he's Citrix 2.0 is what we call him.
Yeah. Actually, that's true. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I think from the perspective of a lot of customers, that we're hearing from as the transition's happening, it's how do I implement it? How do I use it? Do I get it? Does it come with my solution? We're doing PBS or we're doing MCS. Does it work with this or that? And so I think those are a lot of the questions that Andy hit us up early on to say, hey, can you guys jump on one of these to kind of share that? Because I think you guys are hearing that as well. A lot of folks in the partner community, I think, are struggling to answer that question today, and certainly, customers are trying to understand, how do I use this new technology that Citrix has acquired.
Yeah, and let's talk about this concept real quick because I know Stephanie did a good job briefly going over it. But the idea here is there's lots of webinars where people they demo stuff or they talk about a product and they go through PowerPoints. But the idea behind the Lab It Up concept that the user groups in the Carolinas is kind of doing and leading and sharing with everyone else is the idea that we're not going to just talk about it. We're going to do it. Like we're going to show you as much as we possibly can in a 2-hour time frame how you go from nothing to the solution. And we have David Ott with us on. David is one of the leaders, Triad, Greensboro area, North Carolina. David is the leader in that area, and one of his claims to fame is he's a Citrix guy and it's a PowerShell guy. So if anybody on the line has questions around Citrix, specifically around PowerShell, David's your guy. That guy does everything in PowerShell. I think he wakes up and gets out of bed and starts writing scripts. So David, how's it going?
It's going good.
So along the lines of this Lab It Up concept, and I didn't mean to cut you off, David. Anything else you want to bring up about yourself before we move on to the kind of the presentation, the technical part of the presentation?
Nope, nothing I can think of.
So this concept of Lab It Up, I want to be clear that we want to do this once a quarter, and if you guys have a product like NorthScow, the Citrix Workspace Manager that I know plenty of people have done presentations on and talked about, but we want to show how to do it, like from the ground up, right? So that's one of the ones we have in the future. How to integrate Nutanix with Citrix is one of the ones we want to do in the future. So, if you guys out in the audience there have ideas around things you would like to see somebody do a proof of concept right there in front of you, and you can ask questions and get value out of, that's what the goal of this concept is. So with that, Rob Z, I'm going to hand it over to you, and if you can walk us through, I said this wouldn't be a presentation, but there is about a 20-minute or so presentation, and we're going to keep it technical, and then from that we're going to dive into how to build the product out and set it up. So Rob, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay. And I have a, let's make sure I do this, hiding my background. Hold on, there we go. All right, does that look okay, guys?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a short deck, and we're not going to do too much of a deck today, but what I thought we would do is kind of go over the basics of what is layering, right? What does it mean to you? What does it look like from a slightly technical perspective? What's the high-level architecture to add Citrix layering, app layering into your environment? What will it look like? Then really a couple short things on how do you prep for a POC, and then what are the steps of the POC? Then we'll actually jump in and just show it to you, right, which is the better way to do it. So, basics. Okay. First thing, app layering isn't really a product, right? It's really a technology. Right? What we're saying about layering is it's a technology where we capture the file system and the registry, we store it in a disk file, we create a whole bunch of those disk files, and then we put them together to create virtual machines, right? Whether that virtual machine is a Zen desktop, VDI desktop, or it's a session host, we're really taking and virtualizing the disk and kind of putting it together from a bunch of disks, and virtualizing the registry and putting it together from a bunch of registries.
So Rob, can we pause on that real quick? So,
sure.
Because you went through that first part really quickly. It's nothing but the file system, whether it's the operating system part or an application part, but it's the file system pieces plus the registry in a slice of it all, which in this case would be a virtual disk, that then gets kind of blended all together like a big old piece of cake, and the net result is the user experience, right?
Exactly, and that layer cake idea is how we always explain it, because it makes it the easiest to understand, right? So, if you look at our layer stack, we do the operating system, right? So we're the only ones that do the operating system. We'll talk about that. That offers some big advantages to the types of apps that you can do. But you layer in the operating system, and in that layer cake, the operating system is always at the bottom, right? So anything that is part of the operating system is at the bottom of the layer cake. Then you'll create any number of application layers, and when you look at those in this kind of virtual environment, those are in the middle. And then eventually we'll have something called a user personalization layer, which is a user writable layer, which now is experimental, right? It's in beta, but that'll be at the top of the stack. And the way to think of this is when the operating system is looking for a file or a registry key, it's going down the layer cake from the top to the bottom, right? So it's looking through the layers to find a file. The first time it finds that file, or the first time it finds that registry setting, it returns the path, and that's all our product does, is it's kind of returning the path back to the operating system, to other filter drivers, etc. But it returns that path back, and therefore the operating system knows where to get that file from which disk. right, as
But
part of that layer cake.
So stay on the slide just for a second, because that bottom piece, the Windows, the operating system layer, that's very unique. And the first time I heard that is when my mind went kind of crazy, because I was like, I don't really understand what you mean by that. One of my customers started talking about your solution, and I knew about application layers, but I didn't know about the OS layer, which is really just an application, the fuller application layer, right? And then that top layer is kind of the personalization one, the one you guys are working on. You know, that's where Citrix, when Citrix acquired RingCube, that's what they did first, right? They said, oh, that's what everybody's going to want is that top layer, and that's where the personal VDES story came from. So, you know, can you talk about those two just real briefly and where those, I mean, you kind of did already, but, you know, it's the RingCube part on the top, and then the Windows piece at the bottom, and then, of course, the application layer, which there's other partners, products that do that as well.
Right, and you know, one of the keys to layering, because you're taking registry entries in a file system that are created on a particular operating system, you do want to make sure you tie those together, right? Because you're relying on other things. So you're relying on other layers for things they have in their registry. You're relying on the operating system for things it has in its registry. And remember, the only time you install when you're layering is when you're packaging, right? So you create a package, that's when you do the install. Some applications are going to store things like particular GUIDs from the registry, from the operating system, from other files. They're going to, some of them use 8-bit code, 16-bit code, so they store short file names and things. So they're going to keep track of those. You do have to make sure that when you deliver your applications, they're on the exact same operating system that you packaged them on. So the way this works is you create an operating system, you then create all your applications based on that exact operating system, and that way they all work together in concert. And some of the problems that products have had, you know, outside of us are because they don't do that, right? They don't enforce that.
Well, we already have some questions coming in, and one of those, which can be kind of confusing, so let's address it right now, is somebody's asking about Michael's asking about the platform layer. The platform layer is the layer that all these things are based off of, and that's where our OS layer comes from. That's where our application layer comes from. And you know, we started doing this earlier in the week. It's really the first time I'd ever touched the product, and I was like, oh, I never understood what the platform layer is, and we did it one time, like we're going to do it here in a few minutes. It's like, oh, now I get it. Now I get what the platform layer is. But that's a layer that's never intended to be used. It's a layer that's the foundation for all the other layers, right?
That's a little different than that. So that where a platform layer sits, and we're getting a little ahead, but basically a platform layer has the drivers for a particular platform that you're going to use it on, right? So the reason a platform layer is specifically its own thing. So if you're using, just as an example, if you're using PBS, we create a platform layer, we put in PBS tools, the VDA, and we join the domain. So those are things specific to PBS that go in the platform layer, and when I publish to PBS, it uses the platform layer to do that, so that PBS will work. I could support MCS at the same time, and then I'd have a platform layer for MCS, and it wouldn't have PBS tools, it would just have the VDA join the domain, and when I publish to MCS, it puts that MCS platform layer in, so different than the PBS, and MCS looks okay when I publish to MCS. If I wanted to publish to VMware, same thing, right? So what a platform layer is doing is giving you the ability to package in specific drivers that are for that platform when you use it.
Okay, so that makes sense.
It actually sits, I didn't show it here, but it sits above the application layers in an image, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. You know what, let me answer that question a little bit.
And always feel free to say that, hey, that answer's coming, you're going to see it in the POC part. You know, don't let us drag you down into the mud on a specific question on the first slide.
No worries. All right. So back kind of to the high level, right? Citrix App Layering. To us, everything is a layer. There's nothing you leave out. You don't manage anything outside, right? You manage the operating system, you manage the applications, and then those drivers from the platform layer, they're all a layer, right, is the way to think of it. The neat thing about that is the process for doing your packaging for everything is all the same, right? So you don't have to do different things for different pieces, right? They're all handled the same way, which is nice. The design of layering, the whole reason to layer is that I can manage an application once in one place, and then I can deliver it to all different types of use cases, right? So that's really what we're trying to do, and because we do the operating system layer, we can do things with device drivers, early start services, etc. So we can kind of do everything, and we really do get, you know, 99% of apps. We can't do all apps because some apps can't be delivered in an image type scenario where you're packaging into an image. You know, an app that can only install into the user profile isn't going to work with this technology. You might be able to make it work, with some creativity, you know, a login script that copies it to make it work or something, but it's not natively going to work to do something that installs an app into a profile. It's not going to do something that when you're installing the app, it hashes to something on the machine, and it'll only run on that machine that it hashes to, like certain VPNs, et cetera, right? Those types of things are going to be problematic. But most applications will work fine with this technology, because if it has a third-party driver, a kernel mode driver, an early start service, all those things can be handled with our technology, even though they can't by any of the other layering providers.
So as an example, antivirus, right? You never think antivirus would be a layer of an app, but in your solution it can be, right?
It can be, and it usually is, yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
We try to have everything not be part of what you would consider the gold image. We do it a little differently, so we have an OS layer, but correct, we'd want things to be application layers, because then it's easy to switch, it's easy to have different things on different systems that way than having it all be the same.
Hey guys, just a housekeeping thing, but you know, keep asking questions. Somebody back here on the panel must be answering all the questions. That's great. We'll try to bring some of them up in the topic of conversation as we're going through this, but we don't want to stop the entire thing for that. But that's great, Rob. Keep going.
Hey, one quick thing, Rob, if we can mention, there were a couple questions about are we going to demonstrate this with PBS, and so today we're going to demonstrate with MCS specifically, but we'll talk to View Composer and PBS as well.
Correct. Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Rob.
And guys, and if the audience wants a round 2 of this, then we will do a round 2 of this. If we get, we do what we do here and run out of time, we'll do another one, and that time we'll use PBS or use View Composer or whatever. But definitely interested in doing another round of this if people want more.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. So next, to delivery members, you create layers, right? So I don't want to get too deep into it, but as we do a thing where you do packaging, right? You create a layer, you create a library of layers. So I'll have, one or more operating systems, and then I'll have one or more sets of application layers that go with that, and I'll create a library of them. So I have a bunch, and then we have the ability to deliver layers in one of two ways, right? We have something called a layered image, and then elastic layers, which are kind of dynamic and AD group assigned. But if I look at what's a layered image, right, the first thing you do is you create something called a layered image template, and that defines an operating system, right? Which operating system am I going to include in this image?
Hey, Rob,
any application? Yes, sir.
Before you go this, someone asked a question, what does this cost? And so I want to hit that before we talk about the two types. So if you're a Citrix Zen Desktop customer or Zen Desktop customer, and you're buying your, doing your maintenance with Citrix, I guess you got to be enterprise or higher, right? Enterprise Zen Desktop or higher?
We don't even know yet. Quite frankly, just we should know soon, but we don't know for sure yet what level you need to be at.
Yep.
That they're still working on that.
Okay, so I'm speaking ahead of time here, so maybe, but the idea is if you're a Citrix customer and you're paying for the software renewals, then you're going to get one of these things, either layered images and elastic layer or both, is the idea. We'll see where it all ends up. So that's
correct. From our understanding, the layered image piece, which we're talking about right here, would be in all the versions if you are up to date on your maintenance, right? The new maintenance, whatever it's customer services, right?
Software maintenance, and it would be an entitlement.
Correct. And then there'll be some level, and I'm not sure which level it is, where you get the elastic layering and the user elastic layer. Okay, but it definitely hasn't all been put in stone yet.
Yep.
Okay, so the layered image, right? So the idea here is that I have a library of layers, and it makes it very easy for me to produce different, and we can use MCS, or I'll use PBS as an example because we're going to show MCS. So I can create multiple vDisks from these layers to support my different use cases, right? So you'd push up a vDisk with a different configuration based on which layers that you pick to put in that. You always have some OS layer, right? So if you're doing, let's say you're doing 2012 R2 for session host, or you're doing Windows 10 for VDI, you'll have some number of application layers. And by the way, the application layers are tied to the OS layer. So if you have both a 2012 R2 and a Win 10 in your environment, you're going to have to create two sets of layers for those, right? They can't have the same layer for both. And remember, the layers have to get tied to the OS to be safe because of the way layering works, because it's not an install on top of it. We're just taking the already installed things and putting them together, right? So they have to go as kind of groups or paths.
Hey, can I
so you pick the layers you want in your image, Go ahead, Nick.
One quick point, you pointed out earlier, you don't have to do this, right? So if you're out there and you're new to Citrix and this, they're like, oh, what is this all about, right? So you still have the ability with MCS, PBS to create a vDisk with the OS installed and all the apps. This is for those guys who have learned how to do that and they're comfortable with a basic image with all the apps, or at least whatever apps are needed by that user group. And then as you need to start flattening things and having less desktops with more applications that mount to that desktop image or OS image, this is when this becomes the answer, right? So a lot of people have more images than they can manage. This is a way to flatten that and not a requirement.
Yeah, I mean, the layered image piece, instead, this piece without the elastic layers, let's just take the layered image piece. What that gives you is the ability to manage applications in one instance, but still support lots of different use cases through the use of different vDisks and different catalogs, right? Because you can create these image templates, and let's say I have 20 images, right? And Word is in 17 of them, right? I don't have to crack open when I want to patch Word 17 vDisks and update them. I just have to patch Word once and re-upload my 17 images. So the idea behind the layered image is that it's a single instance management for the applications and the operating system, no matter how many images you need to make your environment work, right? Because sometimes you need different images just to make things work the way you need to for licensing or what have you. When we get to the elastic layering, we'll talk about the benefits of that. That'll really cut down the number of images. But if you just get this piece, this is all that you're entitled to, you still get a big benefit because you can manage your environment through single instance management as opposed to having to have lots and lots of different images.
Right.
Okay. So again, the components of the layered image, the layers that you want, the OS layer, you'll have a platform layer, right? So if I'm doing PBS, I'll have my platform layer for PBS. If I'm doing MCS, I'll have a platform layer for MCS, right? And then basically what happens is we merge the things together, and we merge things together in a really smart way. If you have, and if you guys ever used AppDisk or use any of the other technologies and you tried to do third-party drivers in two different layers, you would have found that one set of them would break. Right? Windows keeps something called a driver store. The driver store is a monolithic file, like a database file, and applications install into that. So with layering, if you have two different applications installed into two different layers, they actually have a different version of that driver store, and one would write over the other when you put that layer cake together. What we do is we recreate the driver store when we merge the layers so that you have everything in it when it's there. We only do that on a layered image. We don't do that elastically. So if you have third-party drivers in an application, you have to include that in the layered image or the drivers won't work properly. We do the same thing with .NET Fusion keys. There's a thing in .NET where they keep a registry-based database called Fusion, and we merge the Fusion keys together as well. So if you put .NET in different layers, it will also work properly when you export this image and you get that up there. Those are really important things that are really advanced, and they make this whole thing work to get to that 99% of applications will work.
Long story short, the operating system gets what it needs from a layer somewhere to execute what it's trying to execute, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the layered image, the neat thing about that, once you create that, what we're doing is we're creating a vDisk. It's a normal vDisk just like you created it manually, right? You can, if you want to, you can add versions and manage it and do what you want to with it, right? You can copy it like you do to DR, et cetera, and it works the way it's supposed to work, right? So that's the one way to deliver layers, right?
Hey, quick time check. So you've got like 20-some slides on this. We'll go through the layering types, and we'll go through the elastic layer, and then maybe we jump out and do the proof of concept piece.
Yeah. Let me go through it. And if we do a few less questions, we'll probably get through it quicker.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the idea. I take some layers. I can create one image, different set for another image, different for another. I push them up in the catalogs, I publish them, and those users get what you put into those layers, right? That's the idea behind the layered images. But if I want to update Office, I update it once. If it's in 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 different images, you can push up the new ones and they're all updated. You don't have to do it multiple times, right? That's the idea behind layered images. So what are the advantages there? I manage one time, right? And it's just much easier and quicker that way and more standard. I don't do it differently in different places because it's all automated from that perspective. It works for kernel drivers, early start services, dependent services, filter drivers, third-party drivers, .NET, et cetera, is all handled through the layered image, no problem, right? Big thing there. Now, what's an elastic layer? That's a dynamic layer where you get assigned it based on Active Directory group membership, and when you're logging into a VDI or you're logging into a published desktop on a session, you get those applications that you've been assigned, right? This is dynamic. It works by storing a VHD on a CIF share, and then within Windows mounting that VHD and accessing it pretty much like the network was a SAN, right? Almost like a SAN where it's a block level attachment to that disk file.
So the hypervisor's not putting it together anymore. Now we're actually pulling it from a network share, and Windows kind of layers it together artificially, right?
Correct. So, I mean, the Unidesk technology has a filter driver running in Windows, but Windows mounts the disk and makes it available to that machine. Let's say it's, you know, a session host. So it's mounted by the session host, but our filter driver is still working within there, virtualizing the file system and virtualizing the registry. So everything still looks merged together. It looks like it was local to the machine, to the applications. Right? But correct, it's a Windows technology, so it works across everything. You could have one share that you use for both Azure and your local on-prem in vSphere, Hyper-V, Nutanix, what have you, right? Which is one of the reasons we picked it as a technology and a way to use it. So a neat thing there to be aware of, the session aware. I can have a single session host. I can have one user see, you know, these 3 apps, and a different user see 3 totally different apps, and they don't see each other's apps, right? So that's where I can actually have less images, right? By having the use of elastic layers lets me have more users dynamically accessing applications. They're not streamed, right? So you don't have to wait for them to stream. It doesn't use network bandwidth like streaming does. They're just connecting to it over the network to that share. But that you can have different users see different applications. It doesn't do isolation, so realize that. You could have different users see different things even if it's Java, but it won't let one user see multiple versions of Java, for example. Right? That's how that goes.
So I've got one XenApp server for 5 different departments of users, HR, finance, whatever. They log into it, and their user ID, their group membership is going to pull in the applications that the HR department uses, and it's going to pull in the finance apps as that. I say pull it in, it's going to mount it, right?
Correct. Exactly. Yep.
Great.
And with a session host, a neat thing, I mean, there's different ways to do it. You can have it happen at boot, but normally the first user that goes to use it as access, that'll mount it. For everybody else, they don't have to mount it, they just get access to it, right? So, not that the mount takes long, it's like mapping a drive, right? It's not a super long process. And this is actually how that process goes. We have something called a layering agent on the virtual machine, whether it's a session host or a VDI desktop. And when you're logging in, it goes out and it actually reads, there's 3 JSON files on the share with the rest of the VHD files that are the assignment files. And the reason we do that is that way our appliance doesn't matter. You know, we have appliance that manages all this, but if it was down, it doesn't affect anything from working. The virtual machines boot up, the users log in, they read the JSON file, it attaches the appropriate VHDs to their machine. That's all out of band. If you replicate that CIF share somewhere else, you have a backup of it, people can log in, they will also have the assignments, right? You don't have to worry about, from an architecture standpoint, having a highly available appliance or database or any of that stuff. It isn't used at all. So the user logs in, checks their group membership, gives them the layers they're supposed to have mounted from that disk. Doesn't do anything then unless they run it. If they run the application, it'll go and read blocks off of that VHD that's out on that share.
Hey, so real quick question here. So if I've got XenApp and I've got multi-user session host servers, that's where Elastic Layer comes in. But VDI, the standard layering would work. Is there ever a time where in VDI where it's a one-to-one that you would actually use Elastic Layers?
Sure. I mean, it's the same thing. You know, to get flexibility in VDI, you use Elastic Layers the same way, right? If I have an application and only 25 people use it, I don't want to really have to build it into my image where I have to have a whole different catalog, a different delivery group just to deliver that, right? I can just provide it as an Elastic Layer, and those 25 people will get it on their VDI when they log in.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay. One difference, the Elastic stuff from the layered image. The layered image, we're putting it all together, we're creating it, then it's just like a normal vDisk. In an Elastic Layer, it's virtualized, right? So we have a filter driver running. It virtualizes the file system, makes it all look like one, but they're really different disks. And it virtualizes the registry to make it all look like one but it is a filter driver running with Windows that handles all that. If you just use the layered image part, you don't even need our filter driver running. It just becomes a normal vDisk when you do that. Okay. So advantages of elastic layers: on-demand, dynamic applications. It gives you the ability to support a lot more users with less images in a XenApp environment, right? Makes it very flexible. You don't have to evacuate hosts and reboot them to get new versions in XenApp, right? With the elastic layers, you get the latest version that you've been entitled to every time you log in. So if you give somebody a new version, they just have to log out, log back in, they get the new version applied to them. The way it works, it's unified. It's across all workspaces, right? You could use the same share for different environments within your environment for everything that we support. And we are working on that user writable elastic layer, right, which will let you even do user installed apps on VDI if you want to. Okay.
Can you comment real quickly on the overhead of doing these, both of these, are the layered as well as the elastic? How much overhead, processing overhead are we?
Sure. The layered image, there's no overhead, right? Once you create the vDisk, it's just like any vDisk, right? So there's no overhead at all. In elastic layering, we do have a filter driver running. The filter driver is, every call to open a file or registry key, it has to find that and return it. But it's a very small amount of overhead in general, in that it's something like 0.00035 seconds to do that. I mean, it's very fast. The little bit of overhead that there is, and this is probably the biggest performance hit in layering, is that if you modify a file that's in a layer, so let's say an application has an any file or some other file that when you open it, it modifies it for some reason. We can't modify it. Those are shared read-only files, so we can't modify the one that's sitting out on the disk. We have to copy it first into the writable portion of the desktop and then modify it. That copy is extra, right? That's something that slows the system down a little bit. So sometimes when you open an app, it might open a little slower the first time on a session host. From then on, it would be okay, because then each person would have their own unique version. And when you have the user writable layer, it's really kind of once per user, because once it writes that, it stores that in the user writable layer, and then it's always there. But it's not too bad from a performance standpoint to change. Okay. So chugging on here so that we can get to what we really wanted to do. The architecture, a couple of things. The components, we have something called an Enterprise Layer Manager. It's a CentOS virtual appliance. It drives our web UI that you'll see when we do the demo. It has a SQL within it and the business logic within it. So this is not something where you have to set up a SQL database. That's all within the appliance. It makes it very easy. You install the appliance, you get everything as part of that. You need an elastic layer share, right, as one of the big components for this if you use the elastic layering piece. Again, it's a CIF share, but if for a true production environment, the hard part is you'd want it to be both highly performant and highly available, right? If that share's not there, nobody can get to their layers, right? So you want some type of clustered storage, ideally. If you're doing VDI, you might be able to get away with DFS, right? Because if your one file server goes down, you could have everybody log out, they log in again, they'd get the new one. But in session, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to make sure it's a cluster for sure, so that you don't have to reboot the servers. Because what happens is if one of the nodes fails in DFS, to disconnect all the layers and connect them again, you have to reboot the server, right? So you probably want something that's clustered underneath that. We have a Pbs agent for use with Pbs, and what it actually is used for is it pulls the vDisks up from our appliance into the Pbs store. Small agent that processes things with PowerShell. And then we have connectors. So you'll see there's connectors for vSphere, for Hyper-V, for Nutanix. For each technology that we're trying to integrate with, we have a connector for, right? It's just one of the important technologies.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to revisit this with a PVS one, because a lot of people are asking for that. So we'll do a round two.
Though it's easy, right? When we do MCS, PBS isn't much different. Okay, so again, we just quick review. You have this Enterprise Layer Manager. You create layers. They get stored on that Enterprise Layer Manager, which is a CentOS virtual appliance. It has a big disk associated with it, or a series of big disks that hold the library, right? So when you create the layers, we're actually storing VHDs within a disk. It could be a VHD or a VMDK, depending on what technology you've got the Elm running on, because you can have the Elm run on lots of different things. When I publish out to a provisioning system like PBS or MCS or Composer or Azure, it creates the appropriate disk, and then it pushes it up to that technology. So for PBS, it pushes up a vdisk, right, which a VHD, and creates a vdisk out of it. For MCS, it publishes a virtual machine into, let's say it's vSphere or XenServer, and then that becomes the master VM for your MCS catalog. For Composer, it publishes up a virtual machine, which becomes the parent VM for your pool in Vue. And Azure, it's creating a whole virtual machine for that as well, right? So you can publish to any of those, right? And new ones will be coming, right, as we do different provisioning systems. If you make something in Elastic Layer, we simply copy the VHD up to the share, and then we include the assignments for that VHD in those JSON files we talked about. The guest layering service boots up on the VM where we have it installed, and it knows how to, if it's enabled, if you enable the Elastic Layering, it'll automatically map those disks to the users when they log in, right? Pretty simple from an architecture standpoint.
All I can say is wow. I mean, that's it's game changing. It's important, and it really, you kind of said it at the end. It's kind of simple. It sounds a lot worse than it is. It doesn't. Anyway, people will see it in a few minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's elegant because it is relatively simple, right? Not that there's not a lot of components to it, but it is relatively simple. So one thing to realize with this, you're not stuck on any technology here, right? You can start now with MCS because it's easy. You could then implement PBS. You can use both in the same environment. You can mix hypervisors. I can be on vSphere now, transition over to Hyper-V, put some Azure in. Maybe I have a workload that I want to throw up and I stick it up in Azure. The layers are all the same, right? What you push it to is based on the connectors that we have, and you can use it either to migrate or in a hybrid mode, or to grow, or however you want to. Even if you wanted to get rid of us, you could just say, hey, I don't want to use this technology after all. You just publish out your vDisks and do things the way you used to do them, right? It's kind of neat the way it works and how modular it is, and that you can really start now. Let's say, you're really in love with vSphere and you're using that, then you decide, hey, this VMware stuff's pretty expensive. Let me go to XenServer. All you got to do is keep everything that you have and just push it over into XenServer.
Well, I think that's huge, right? So any product that is open-minded to all the different flavors is a good friend of a Citrix admin, right? We run into so many products that, okay, this is great, but it's only for vSphere. Oh, well, okay, that doesn't do a whole lot for me, or it does a lot for me, but it locks me in at the same time. It's great that it has. I mean, just the fact that it understands provisioning services and can be put into that mix is huge.
Right. Very, very cool and easy. Okay. I'm going to zip through this Elastic Layering. We talked about this already. I can do it on session. It's smart enough to have different people see different things based on their session ID, and I can also do it on VDI the same way, right? And then lastly, this is kind of a DR slide. I'll just go through it quick just to tell you. I mean, let's say it's PBS and we're creating vDisks. You take those vDisks, you copy them to your DR site, and you have your vDisks available in DR, right? Simple. We're not doing anything there. You're just doing what you used to do. The Elastic Share, all you have to do is copy that to the remote site. Remember, all the assignments are included on the stuff that's in the share. So you make that available in DR and everything's available, right? There's a registry key that defines on a system where it looks for that Elastic Share. You can just create a GPO to change that for DR and you're all set, right? DR is pretty simple in this environment. The user layers are a little tougher when you get to that, but still doable.
Well, question on this. So let's say it's not DR, but it's two active data centers. I'm just going to have the SIP share replicating between the two data centers, and that takes care of what I need, right? Or not?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And then someone asked a question. There's some of these that I would love to know answers to, and I'm just kind of skipping them. But Acropolis, Nutanix Acropolis, is that on the roadmap as well?
It is. It's not on the roadmap. It's in the product. So Acropolis is in the product now. We have a Acropolis connector and an Acropolis Elm. Okay. You need to use it with MCS right now, which is the only thing that works with Acropolis, but it's there already for that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so if you're using Acropolis, you might as well be using MCS. You can use it with PBS. It's not 100% there, but it's there. You can make it work pretty easily. But yes. So
I think you make it work. I don't think it's yet supported, right?
Right.
And fully tested. Yeah. And you could do that with us immediately, right? It's just that I don't think they've said it's supported yet.
All right.
Okay. All right. So now we're really close to where we're going to be to do our POC. When you want to prep for the POC, the first thing you would do is download the appliance. It's a virtual appliance. And I saw some questions there. Can I get this now? You can go to Unidesk. You can request an account right? When you get the account approved, you can then download the software and start to try it. Just be aware it's going to be a different version than the one that's Citrix. The Citrix one is a few weeks away, right? We're expecting it by the end of this quarter. So it'll come out then, and it'll be slightly different than the one that's out on Unidesk. You will be able to upgrade, so if you start with the Unidesk one, you'll be able to upgrade it to the Citrix one. You download the appliance, you create a gold image. The best way to do that is to create a VM gold just from ISO and build it. Don't take something you've already built that was pre-designed for other things. It generally doesn't work well. Just create a new one, patch it up. It's all ready to go. You need a test environment, you need a hypervisor, you need a broker, a provisioning solution. It's better. It's a whole lot better with 10 gig networking. You can do a 1 gig network. Just be prepared that it might be slow. You can do it with slower storage. Just be prepared that it might be slow. We're dealing with big files and big disks and big things, and if you're not using flash or hybrid and you're using a 1 gig network, you can do it, but it's not going to be speedy. Okay. You do need a CIF share. SMB3 is preferred. In production, I would highly recommend SMB3 because of the performance benefits you're going to get from that. You want an Active Directory. You need some appropriate permissions for the accounts that we're going to use, and you need to have firewall ports open. So if it's a lab and everything's open, great. If not, there's a published list of the ports that you need open between different pieces of the product. Okay. And then what are the steps for a POC? We install the appliance. Currently, you import an OVF, you assign IPs, DNS, etc., and then you configure the appliance, the link to Active Directory, which we call Directory Junction, and the network share. In that first version that comes out with Citrix, for vSphere, Acropolis, and Zen Server, you don't have to, on the gold image side, you don't have to make it an OVF and import it. You'll be able to just pull in the gold image. But currently it's the way we're going to show you today. You prep the gold image, patch it, install hypervisor tools, take a snapshot, then install Unidesk tools, shut it down, copy the file from the VNDK or the VHD file that creates to a share, and then we import that from the share. That's the piece that's going to change in the next version, where it'll be a lot easier than that. Next thing you do is create something called a machine template, right? And that is a copy of your gold image VM without a disk, right? And then you set how much memory and processors, et cetera, that you want in your install machines, which are the packaging machines. And we use that when we create a packaging machine to configure it. Then you'll create a platform layer, which we talked about. If you're doing MCS, it'll be VDA installed and domain join. If you're doing PBS, you install PBS tools, install the VDA and domain join. That's all it is. You guys will really love this if you're used to PBS. If you want to upgrade from one version to another in PBS, you just create a new platform layer. You install the new versions, and the next time you publish your image, you use the new layer instead of the old one. There's no reverse imaging anymore or touching anything, right? It's very simple to upgrade. Same thing with VMware Tools. You add a version to your OS layer, update VMware Tools, you upgraded, right? You don't have to worry about all that.
Actually, Citrix fixed that for the PBS.
They fix it for their upgrade, right? Not VMware Tools, right? You still have to
Right.
do that, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And the VDA. Okay. Then you create application layers, and then you test. That's it. So we should be ready to switch back over.
Okay.
And actually show some stuff.
Yeah, so here's what we're going to do now. We're going to start talking about, we're going to go through the real meat, which that was pretty good meat, and by most people's standards, that was what a podcast or, excuse me, a webinar would be all about, just kind of talking about it. Now we're going to attempt to show it. You know what they always say about the demo gods, right? They'll bite you, but I think we're going to get away with it. But Rob, let's talk me through what we did the other day to get ready for the proof of concept as it stands right now, because I got to be honest with you guys, we realized that we weren't going to have time in 2 hours plus the presentation to do all the pieces, so we did a couple things ahead of time. We don't really like to bake the cake ahead of time, but we baked a couple little ingredients. We took a couple of ingredients, took care of those, and because they take a lot of time just sitting and watching, and that's where we're at now. So Rob, talk me through what we did the other day.
Sure. So the first thing we did was we downloaded the appliance, so the Unidesk appliance, which is an OVF. We imported the OVF, and then we did some basic configuring on it. Within that, I think we set up. I don't think we did IP. Normally, you would set up IP and DNS and all that, and I think we just used DHCP, right? So that was configured as part of that. Then we took and created a gold image, so a VM, and he installed the Windows version. I forget which version you used on it. And all we did was disable Windows updates on that and install the Unidesk software. We saved
Can we slow down and just talk
to
through
the
those?
share, and then we imported it.
Can we slow down and talk through those just a little bit at a time? So we went out first and we got the Unidesk 4 version of the appliance. That's this Unidesk ELM, which was an
click on
OVF.
that, so we can show them what you'll see when you click on the downloads. You'll see the different versions. So what you want to do is get the appliance that matches where you want to run it, right? So if you want to run it in Nutanix, or if you want to run on vSphere or Hyper-V or Zen Server, you have to get the right version at the top there. You'll see there's all the different versions there. And it's really the same thing. It's just in a different format.
And this came down with all the tools. This one had everything we needed for Zen Server, right? We didn't have to go.
Correct.
First of all, we didn't go to the Citrix website, not yet anyway. We went here, and then we pulled this down and had all the tools we needed to make this work, all in one download, right? Okay.
Correct.
All right, so let's walk through that a little slower. So we got the OVF imported. We also took a Windows Server 2012 template, and we built out from this template. We built out a base VM here that we then turned around and worked with the appliance to. We got this to where we wanted it. No domain join, no VDA, just a base install of Windows with the patches. And then we worked. Do you want to go through how we got that over into? Well, first of all, we exported. Well, snapshot we didn't take, but we should have. And then we exported that using the Zen Center tool here to an OVF that we stuck out on a network share, right? Did I miss anything?
That was it. I mean, I don't know if you want to show. We did have the one issue where in Zen Server, when you do to export an OVF, it wants to create a helper VM, and you have to make sure that helper VM has a valid IP address. So we had some issues there, I remember, because it wasn't getting an IP address, right? But basically, all we did was take the VM and export it as an OVF to a share, right?
Right.
Now, just be aware that process in the Citrix version, the first version to come out under Citrix, you won't have to do, right? You'll just be able to select the VM directly, and we'll import it from the VM. But currently, you do have to do that. You have to export, and we actually import from the VMDK, which we can show in the appliance.
Right. So we exported to an OVF out to a network share that I had, and that's how we ended up with what I was showing here, which is this piece here.
Right, which is basically a disk file, right, and the OVF file. Now what you do with that is you go into after you bring up the appliance, you log into it, and we can show that, won't you?
Internet Explorer or Chrome, or does it matter?
Not Chrome, because you need Silverlight. Chrome doesn't like Silverlight. So you could use Firefox or Internet Explorer.
Right. Well, here's where we're going to come to the first piece of the presentation where we might run into a hurdle. I did not go check to see if I had Silverlight installed, so we'll find out. We can do this over port 80, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You can also force it to go to 443.
Okay. All right, so it'll take a second or two for this to load. And it was the administrator?
Yeah, and Unidesk 1 with a capital U is the default password. That too will change in the Citrix version. You'll be setting your own passwords when you install. Okay.
Well, I must have Silverlight on here, huh?
You do? Yeah, it wouldn't come up. So that 1, 2, 3 is going to keep coming up till we finish all those steps, right? So, it's set up, create your first layers, and then publish, right? And then it goes away, just to be aware. Now, the other thing, so we installed this. When we install the appliance, you get this. We then went into, just real quick, showing the about, and create a license. Right?
And tell them, so you sent me a license, but tell them where they go to get a license.
Yeah, so if you've been able to download the software, that means your account was approved to download it and you have a license. All you have to do is log in with your account. So click on Manage License there. And be aware the first Citrix version, the licensing disappears, so you won't have to do any of this. But if you do the current version, you will have to do it. But you just log in with your account, your Unidesk account in this case, and it'll pull your license down and use it. Right?
And that's if you're officially licensed.
Now that you're on the internet and you had it, it should pull down the same license you did the other day. But
yeah, the other day we weren't on the internet, we're doing this. But so is that pulling a license? So for right now, it's pulling from Unidesk a grace period license. Would they have their actual real license? What would they get with that license? How long would it last?
I think the default is 7 days, but when we set up the account, we make it 30 days, right? And then you can request it to be longer, right? But just again, the Citrix version, when that's available, isn't going to have licensing to start out with, right? So there won't be any licensing at all. You won't have to do anything.
Okay. All right, but this one's licensed, so that's just a little note. You got to get licensed, or we're not going to be able to do a whole lot. So then,
Right.
and there should be like a 30-day license for you at the very least, waiting out there.
So now I don't even remember if we did that, but click on users, right? One of the first things to set up is something called the directory junction, right? So click on directory service there, middle tab, and say create directory junction on the right. What this is we're going to set up our ability to talk to a domain controller so that you could use Active Directory accounts to make them administrators and log into the appliance via that. So you can the name is just a name. You can make it whatever you want. Normally the domain name, but it's text, so you can call it what you want.
Okay. Okay.
And server address, you can put a domain controller IP. You can put usually the domain name, and that'll just kind of round robin between your different controllers.
Yeah, I don't trust my DNS admin, so.
And then say next. And for us, next is down, right? So.
Yeah, I was about to point that out. The first time you told me hit next, I was like, what is he talking about?
Same thing here. This is your account that you want to use to query Active Directory, and it can be any user account. Doesn't need any type of permission.
So don't ever do what I'm doing here, but I use my admin for all my service accounts. Do I need NetBIOS name here, or what do I do?
You can do it either at or the domain / either one will work.
And we'll test because I don't trust me. Yeah. Okay, good.
But it wouldn't let you go further without doing it.
Okay,
then you always want to pick the root, right, of your domain. In this case, it's a small one, so that's all there is. But the test DN button is pretty funny. We had that because way back when you had to type that in instead of pull it, right? So it made sense to test it. Now it doesn't make sense to test it, but we still.
I guarantee you, everyone on this call has typed in a base DN wrong at some point in their life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next, it's set up properly for Active Directory. Right. And create.
This is usually when somebody's saying, well, do you support Novell?
Actually, so you can do Novell, but a lot of the, elastic layering won't work with Novell.
Yeah.
We kind of have that in there from when we used to support Novell in earlier versions, but no, it's not going to do everything you want to do if you use Novell.
Okay.
All right, so then just to show them quick, click on System. We'll just show you what's in there. Top tab level.
Okay, gotcha.
And then see here, what you see is the appliance, and then there's a settings and configuration in that middle tab layer. Yeah, actually, that's a good thing to point out. So, Andy just showed you see where it says there's the layering service and there's that storage. The default size for the library store is 300 gig, right? So when you install that, and actually I didn't mention that, but that's really important to know. This is going to use 330 gig right off the bat, so you have to make sure when you have that much storage wherever you're putting this, right? 300 of it is the library store where we have for working files and where we store the VHDs, and that's what that little bar is showing us. How much of that have we used, right? How much do we have available? You can expand that disk to a terabyte, so you don't want to make this bigger than a terabyte on these appliances because of the way Linux works with it, but you can have multiple 1 terabyte drives and then we combine them together, so your store can be pretty big. All right, click on Settings and Configuration. We'll just look at that real quick, what's in there. The first thing in there is the Unidesk Lab section. That's where you enable if there's something that you want to test that we have in labs. For instance, we have the ability right now to test the user layer for Win7x64, and if you want to test that, you'd click Edit on that and enable it, and it would enable it in the console. Windows 10 test user layer for test is coming, right? So in the next version, we expect to see that in there as well. Session's a little farther away. We're going to do session as well. So go down a little bit if you want to change your certificate. You would
so
do
Rob,
that.
What you were talking about there was earlier when you had the cake layers on that first slide. That would have been that very top layer that was the user-initiated writes, right? That's what you're talking about?
Correct, right. It's a user writable layer. So similar to what PVD used to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So if you go down a little bit in this, if you want to put a real cert in there, you would do that here. It lets you upload the certificate, right? There's some requirements around doing that, but that's how you would do it. You put your network share in that next section. We did that already. Right? Andy went in when we were working the other day and put in the network share. And on the network share, I'd say you want a minimum of 40 gig. It'd be better to have a couple hundred gig, but you want to make sure it has at least 40 to start out with. Security setting there is how quickly this interface is going to time out, right? It's set to 15 now. If you make it 0, it won't time out. If you make it some other number of seconds, it will.
Question for you regarding the network share. What's going in there? I mean, obviously the elastic layer would go there when I get there, and then right now my...
So the current one, that's where we put the OS layer to import it, right? But once you import it, you can delete that, right? But that's where that's kind of the working area for that.
Okay, all right, got it.
And then yes, all your elastic layers go there, right? When you're doing that.
Okay, great.
And I think you can also set up a mail server in here to be notified in there's not a lot of things we notify on, but if there's a failure of some of the services, it'll send you an email, right? And that's pretty much it. Log retention, those types of things. So I think we're actually ready to, let's go to layers. Let's show them how we created the OS layer, right? Because we did it already, but let's just show how.
Yeah. So let's create a new one and just not go through the long part of creating it.
Sure, right? So we're going to create an OS layer, and you're going to give it a name.
And just to be clear, and I screwed this up a while ago when I tried to chime in, this is the layer that we have to build all the other layers from. The platform layer, the app layer, you got to have this layer to have something to start with, right? Right.
The OS layer, you can't do anything without an OS layer, right? Because we're building everything on top of it. It becomes your installer machine, right? And then it's the way we build the applications on top. Now, just an aside for versioning, what I usually do is I use a number and a date. And when you pick things, so we're going to create an OS layer, that's the initial version. Then when you want to patch it, you're going to add a version to that. So like when I make my initial version, I call it 1.0 and give it a date. And then when I make my second version, I call it 1.1, 1.2, whatever. If I do something major to it, like maybe on Windows, I go from 15.11 to 16.07, I would jump it up to 2.0, right, with a date, that kind of thing. But you can do whatever you want. It's a text scale for versioning. But when you pick the layers, you see the version and you see the name. You don't see the description and you don't see the version description, just so you know what you get to see.
And as a good admin, because I know all of us do this, we always put in good descriptions, right? We always put descriptions in, all of us. That's a joke.
Yeah. What I actually think is more important than documenting here, because these are a little hard to see sometimes, is keep a log. You know, when you're working in this stuff and you're creating layers, keep a shared log, whether it's in, OneNote or in a spreadsheet or something where you're writing down what you're doing, because you will forget, right? You'll forget what you put in the layers.
Well, that's the problem. We all say, oh, I'll remember why I did this, and then 6 months later we have no idea.
Yeah.
All right. So next.
Next. Now this is, a lot of people get confused with the connectors here. What we're saying here is we only have a network connector because we're going to try to pull in this VMDK from a network. So here it's already there, we set it up. I'm just going to say next, and it's going to go out to look for that image we're trying to pull in from that connector, right? If you do new, it brings up the list of connectors, which if you were using one of those 2 other products you could use, right? But in this case, and then in the future, what you'll see there is vSphere to be able to pull a VM from vSphere and XenServer to pull a VM from XenServer. But right now, we're just going to say browse here. And we're going to go to that share and where we copied that on our share. Right. So
and really important, you had me pick the VHD, right?
Correct. It's the actual disk file that we want to import, right? So that's what you would pick. So go ahead and choose it. And you can go through the wizard and start it, and then we'll cancel it. So just to show how it works, you can give it an icon, right, whatever one that's there. You can also use your own icons, which look a little better, right? Any transparent PNG works great. Say next.
It's a question. I don't see a 2016 icon here. Is that just missing, or is there the limitation at this point?
Yeah, it's just missing. It's supported. So they didn't do the artwork. And say create, right? And that will go and start to pull it in. Now what you do that create, then at the bottom, there's those little sergeant stripes. Click on those for me at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, this is our task manager, so you can see tasks that are running. And then if you double click the task, or you poke it in the eye, as we say, like click on the eye, you'll see the actual detail of the task. And then here's where we can cancel a task. So if you were creating virtual machines, creating layers, you can always cancel them. We'll clean up what's out there, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to click cancel on that so we stop the import because we don't need to use your resources to do that.
Well, my question, I was wondering if this was growing. That's actually sucking it into the appliance, right? Or not?
It is.
Okay,
it
so
is.
this should be shrinking. Yeah.
It is, but it's not that dynamic, right? We check that every so often, right? It's not going to show it to you as it shrinks.
Yeah. Well, I just hit the refresh button on the browser, so I may just have...
That's good to show them. There's actually a refresh button within the console. It's the little green thing at the top there. See that circular, that one? Yeah, that's a refresh for our interface. So, which you definitely want to use rather than what you did, because it'll always do what you just did when you do that. So open the task manager and cancel that task. Let's kill that. And then let's go to our next step.
Okay.
So double click and then cancel. Now you want to be careful in here, right? We do say, are you sure? But those cancel buttons are awfully close to the close button, just so you know. Right?
Oh, cancel all. Gotcha.
Yeah. Cancel and cancel all, there's only one task. Sometimes there's multiple tasks, so the cancel all will cancel multiple versus one.
Okay. All right, great.
Okay.
All right, so that's how we ended up on Tuesday, I think it was, we were working together here, where we had a test platform layer.
Actually, click on the OS layer, right? That's how we ended up with the OS layer, not the platform layer yet, right?
Gotcha. Yep. Okay.
So you get the OS layer. Then the next step is I need to create a platform layer because I got to install my platform tools. And in our case for MCS, it's going to be the VDA. So then you click on platform layers, and you say create a platform layer. And now here, the layer name is going to be something like, you know, let's say if we were doing PBS, what I do for my platform layers is I do PBS 7.12 VDA 7.12, or let's say you were on 7.6 for your VDA but 7.12 for PBS, I'd put PBS 7.12 VDA 7.6. That's how I like to do it. You can do anything you want for the name, right? You can make it whatever you want. It's just a text field. And you can change it whenever you want, right? It doesn't really store it that way, but you want to make sure that you're understanding what's in it so that when you create a different one to upgrade, it makes sense that way. And you always need the name and you always need the version, right? Not the descriptions. You can put the descriptions in, but they're not required.
Right.
The max layer size there, for something like this, you don't ever need to make it bigger. You always want it to be at least 50 to 100% bigger than you think the files are going to take up, right? The change in delta is going to take up because you want it to be able to grow over time, right? If it's, I don't usually change it from the default, but you can, right? So if you think it's only going to be 3 gig, you can make it 5 gig, that kind of thing. Next.
And so it's whatever it is, it's thin, right? It doesn't use the whole thing unless it needs it.
It's a little confusing. It's thin in some environments and not thin in others because of some technology things we have. But in this case, it's thin. Yeah.
Okay.
Zen server. Okay. You have to pick the OS layer you want to create your platform layer for, because remember they go together. We only have one, so we're going to choose the one we have. But if you had multiple, you'd be making the platform layer only for one of them. Okay. Next. Now here, this is important. That Zen server was not there yesterday, right? All you saw there was the network share, and some people get confused by this. You have to click New when you're first setting up your connector for the platform, for the hypervisor you're using, and then you see the ones that we currently support, right? So you can do Azure, you can do Nutanix, you can do vSphere or Zen server. Hyper-V, while we support Hyper-V for the ELM, we've not created connectors for Hyper-V yet. So you can do Hyper-V if you want to, but there's some manual steps in doing that. You would use the network connector. We would write out disk to the network share. You would attach them to a VM and do your packaging, and then you'd save them back in from that. But Hyper-V is not as fully supported as these other things because we don't have a connector for it yet. We hope to by the end of this year, but it's a little bit behind some other work. Okay. So in our case, we wanted to do Zen server, so you'd pick Zen server and say New. Go ahead and do the, well, you can just edit the one you have, actually, to show them. Click on the one you have and click edit. Now, this is important. When we do this, this was just so we were rewriting our interface. We were getting off Silver Shell, so all the truly new stuff is in a different interface. So you'll see this actually opened up to a different port. You have to have access to those ports from your client. So if you have a firewall in place and it doesn't let you open 3002 and 3004, you'd have a problem getting to the screen. So just realize if you can't get to it, you might want to open it on a machine on the subnet where your appliance is.
Hey, quick question before we
Thing's a little confusing because it's at the top there and it looks like it's not there, right? So you have to put a name up there.
Hey, quick thing to point out before we get to this. So we're going to talk about this template here in a minute. We went to Zen server prior to this and created a template. and so we were able to point to that when inside this console and leverage it.
Right. And that template, one interesting thing about the template is usually what you do is you take your gold image, you clone it, right? You modify RAM and processors the way you want it. You have to remove the disk because our template, we're going to use it, but we're going to put a disk in it, so you don't want it to have a disk in there because you'd end up with 2 disks.
Mm-hmm. And one quick thing we found the other day is I didn't remove the DVD from the physical DVD from the DVD drive of the template, and when we came up we couldn't boot, but that's just kind of a dumb thing that I forgot to do.
It's good to know because I'm pretty sure when I did Zen Server I did the same thing.
Okay, good.
So I don't think it was unusual to do that. Okay, so you put in a server address, you put in a name, a password, right? You check credentials. It needs to be, I'm not positive about the level you need to be in Zen Server because I've always used administrator, but we have that published on our website if you want to see that. You pick
well, the good thing is you have a test here, so you'll find out pretty quick if it's right or wrong.
And the last thing there that's important is that, see that layer disk cache size there? What that lets you do is define a certain amount of your storage to use as a cache. As we create the install machines, we call them, with different configurations, different OS and prerequisite layers, it'll leave those up there to speed things up. So instead of us having to create it and push it up there, it's already up there, and it'll just clone it from there. So if you use that cache disk, it'll speed up your processing. If you do have slow storage and slow network, then if you have a little extra storage, it'd be great to be able to use that cache because it'll at least speed it up for you that way.
And that's how much of the local storage repository, in my case, that's the only one I have, but the storage repository that you've chosen, how much it's going to use for the caching of this
Correct, right. So yeah, so if you say only 100 gig of it can be used for that, then what we'll do is the most frequently used configurations will stay there, the others will get deleted. Right.
Okay. Sorry, took me a second. All right, here we go. All right, now what do you want to show next?
That's it really. You would save, right? In this case, we're going to close. We don't need to save in case you change something.
Okay.
All right, so you select, then you're selecting your connector that you just created. Say next. Right? And this is probably the most confusing one. In our product, you could have 2 different types of platform layers, one for packaging and one for publishing. I've never used the packaging one. So the publishing one you need all the time. The one we're going to create now is for publishing. So you're going to click that second box that says this platform will be used for publishing. And then you're going to pick your hypervisor, your provisioning service, etc. So for us, Zen Desktop means VDI and Zen App means session, right? So when you look at that connection broker piece, the next one down, right? And so even if you've installed Zen Desktop but you're running session on it, pick Zen App, right?
And Rob, I might throw something in here as well. You'll know you did the wrong one. If you select the top one, you won't get a choice of provisioning service or connection broker in the GUI.
Right, right. If you pick that, you're going to use it for creating layers.
Oh, I got you. If you use this one.
Yep, correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, let me just pause for a second. We keep going on here. David Ott, do you have anything that that you want to interject or ask?
Nothing really. Someone had a good question, but it was answered by Rob about the putting the VDA in the application layer instead of the platform layer. I was actually wondering about that myself.
So we want to put that.
The reason we want the VDA in the platform layer is that when we create a layered image, the platform layer is at the top of the stack, the application layers are in the middle, and the OS is on the bottom. That way we know all the drivers from the VDA are going to be at the top. One interesting point, if you do use single sign-on, right, something like Improvato or one of those, I usually would put that in the platform layer because the VDA writes to the part of the registry for Windows login providers, and so do single sign-on products. So it's usually good to put that in the platform there.
Hey, can I say something real quick? I mean, this is awesome, and this is something I want to use. It's something I want my customers to use. But at the same time, you know, if you're just starting with all this and you're just trying to figure out how the VDA interacts with the director, with the controllers, you know, you don't have to use this right away. Get comfortable with the product in general, and then start thinking about how you might add this in to help solve more challenges. I know we talked about that earlier, but I'm afraid some people are seeing this and scared to death at what we're talking about here.
And one more thing, I'm not sure if you covered it already, but I ran into this when I was messing with it. Platform layers for each OS, you only have one platform layer. You can't do multiple. I tried multiple, and that did not work.
For the OS, or do you mean for
platform?
You can have different platform layers, but they need to be for different platforms.
Right.
Like one for NCS, one for PBS, one for.
I tried creating a platform layer. One just did domain join, one did the VDA, one did the hypervisor tools. And I tried
I see what you mean. Yeah. You can only choose one platform layer, absolutely. Yep, when you publish, you can't have multiple, correct.
Okay.
Gotcha. See, those are always interesting because that would never even occur to me that anyone would think that, but it makes sense. Now I get it. Good question. All right, so then you would do next, and create, and that would create something called an install machine, right? So we're not going to do that because we have one sitting there, but basically you go to the end, you say create, and it spins up a virtual machine for you to do the packaging. So now we're going to do the cooking show thing, right? We're going to close this. So and we had started one of those yesterday, and you can see at the bottom there, see it says creating platform layer test and action required, right? That's because we already did that. And here's a neat thing if you want to. Click on test, Andy.
Okay.
Up top there, click edit properties. And name it something real now. Right? Name it what you want it to be.
Okay.
And then just go all the way to the end and say save, and it'll change that right on the fly, which is kind of cool.
And it'll save it.
It's just a text field, right? So now if you look there or you look, it'll update. Now it still says we're creating test at the bottom because it hasn't updated that task, but it's now the new name, which is neat. All right, so what we want to do now is actually create the platform layer. So we're going to go into the hypervisor and open a console on that machine it created. Right?
So that's this machine?
Start it first because we have it off. Right?
Yeah. So real quick, so this little task said action required, and this confused me. So not action required in here, but action required on our part at the hypervisor level, right?
Correct. If you open it, it tells you, right? If you remember on the task, you can always double click them, and you'll get more information about the task. Yeah. And if you actually read that, right, you can see that we're telling you to go to your packaging VM and install your.
I'm a systems admin. I don't read. I just click on stuff as it pops up. Often true. So I hit, yeah, I'm okay to cancel this, right?
No, don't. We're going to use it.
Okay, all right. So back over to my Zen Center. Let me get rid of all this. Oh, man. Sorry, I've buried myself in here now. The problem is I got this
Now, that's normal, in my experience.
This thing is covering up a lot of stuff. Okay, so here's my Zen server. Here's the test that was pushed out to this hypervisor.
And you notice our packaging machines, they have a name and then a date timestamp of when you created them. So the name would be the name of the layer you're creating. Remember, we originally called ours test, right? So I called it test. If you were doing something called, Office 2016, right? That machine name there, it's not really the computer name, but the machine name within Zen Server would be Office 2016 with the date timestamp after it. Right?
So I could easily just go in here. I'm not hurting anything by doing this, right? If I change it.
You might be. Don't know. I wouldn't do that.
Don't do it. Okay, I won't do it. I'll do that when everybody's gone.
That might be hurting it because we might be remembering it that way. I'm not sure how we remember it.
Okay.
I haven't tried that piece. Yeah.
I would assume it would be some kind of GUID, but who knows? So we'll leave it like it is.
I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't.
Or some type of UID. All right, so what next?
So log in.
Do you remember the password?
I never knew the password.
That was just a test.
Luckily you remember.
It's the same password for everything I've got.
So if we were doing PBS, right, we'd install PBS tools, run the PBS optimizer, reboot, install the VDA, right, let it do its thing, reboot, and the last thing is join the domain. For MCS, we don't need PBS tools because we're not using them. We're just going to install the VDA and then join the domain. And we're only joining the domain so that we're setting up the registry properly, so it'll work right later on.
And just real quick, you We did install the Zen server tools, the VMware tools. We installed that before we did the ODF.
In the gold image, when we created the gold image, we installed the OS tools, right?
Okay. Let's see. So we're going to use, yep.
So we want to create a master image. Someone asked me that today. Yes, that's what we want to do. You include receiver if you want to, right? It's up to you.
Yeah, I never do. It's always old off the media. Let's see. What is the name of this thing?
Now, of course, if you want the newer receiver, you can just install that, right? You can also do that in a layer. Right?
Oh, that's not going to work because it's not turned on. So for the sake
so as long as
of...
you don't need it to be turned on, you just need to make sure you typed it in right.
Right. Yeah, but let me go ahead and turn that guy on because I'm going to need him pretty quickly later.
You have enough memory? Because I know we were...
Sure.
So you can keep going as long as you check your typing again, right? Then it's okay.
Let's see. Yeah, I'm good with that. Okay, and he'll be coming up now anyway.
And then, yeah, so do you use the app V or not when you?
No, I don't, not at this point.
So I don't check it if I were you, if you don't use it.
Oh, yeah. What were you referring to?
The bottom.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Okay. Now, unless you've got something else for us to do, we're going to have a little bit of time here while this installs. Do you want to try to address a couple questions, or do you have something else you want me to go do?
Well, I mean, it's up to you. What you can do is start an application package if you want, right?
Okay,
you can
let's do that.
Multiple things at a time, sure.
You're assuming I can,
Go back to the console. And click on App Layers, and then, say Create App Layer.
So I want to close this, right?
You can close it, yeah.
Okay, so create an app layer.
Yeah. Let's do, I don't know, Notepad++, a hard one. Right?
Well, we don't have it downloaded, so I thought about that this morning, and then I went on and did something else and forgot about it.
You have internet access, right? That doesn't take long.
Yeah, it won't take long. Now, I have a question for you. What if I wanted to put something like Telnet client that's part of the OS in here? Would that? I guess that's kind of dumb. Well, never mind. That would be irrelevant because it's already in the menu.
What if you wanted to put PuTTY in with it? I mean, you can put a layer. We're not defining an application in a layer. It's whatever you install. You could install 10 applications in a layer. People often create a utility layer and install Java and Flash and something like Notepad++ and an FTP client and that kind of stuff all in one layer. Nothing wrong with that. As long as you want to, when you give that layer to a machine or to a user, they're going to get everything in it. You can't say you can only have 3 of the things in the layer when I put in 5, right? Mm-hmm. But you can put as many things as you want in the layer.
So should we go out and get Notepad++ real quick before we do any of this, or keep going?
Well, you can spin the machine up. Remember, this is just going to create the install machine, right? So go ahead and keep going. All right, it's based on your OS that you have. Now, if you had multiple OSs, you'd pick the one you'd want to package on, right? You could do whichever one you want, right?
And it's only going to be one, or can I pick multiple at the same time?
No, it's only one, right? It's going to create an install machine with that OS.
Right? Yeah, so this is the cake layers, right? This is kind of the cake layers at this point, or?
Yeah, I mean, but basically with the OS layer, you'll have different versions of the same one, which are patch levels, and then you'll have, like I might have a 2012 R2 and a Win 10. I got to pick one that I want to package on. Right?
Okay.
Now he jumped through that, but realized that we just picked the connector for Zen Server because we're going to do packaging on Zen Server. If you have multiple hypervisors in your environment, you could actually package in different places if you wanted to. Right? You don't usually, but you could. Okay.
So I want to go ahead and reboot.
It's going to do its reboot thing to finish the install. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Zen Server.
Zen Server, we're going to package on. Right. Now this is a cool screen. Anybody that's done packaging before, you'll really like this. You can pick that, and you can take any other layer in your environment and have it put on your install machine. Why would you use that? I'm installing an add into Office. Let's say I'm installing the full Acrobat that has adds into Office. It won't do that if Office isn't there. So I can just check that box, select my office layer. We don't have any now, so you're not seeing anything, but select my office layer. I don't have to prep a machine, install Office, and do all that stuff. We'll just put Office right on it, your Office, right, and it'll be there. Let's say you have a Java layer and you're installing an app that requires Java to install properly and run. You just include Java. It would be on the install machine, right? It would work. So it's a pretty cool feature, that one. Say next.
So leave it checked. Hey, quick question, Rob. Is there a class? Is there like a full-blown 2-3 day class for this?
There's not. There's actually free online classes right now. If you go to unidesk.com and go into the training section, you can. We have 4 classes in there that are online-based classes that are free. I'm sure Citrix will offer, in time classes for it, but there aren't any now.
Okay. So next here.
Yep. And here, that's the default just app icon. You can also, remember, you can create your own icons just by using a PNG or a JPEG. And just say create, and that's going to spin up another install machine, right? Another VM that we would install that application with. Now, what did we want to? There was something in the middle of that we were going to look at. I forget what it was.
So what is this? This is going to create another VM that's going to be used to scrape together the package layer for Notepad++, right?
Right. We call them install machines. It
Rob.
dynamically creates an install machine and brings it up.
Hey, Rob, will you talk to a little bit about the cached installation machine as a way to improve the app packaging times? There was somebody who was asking about that.
Sure. I just did a little while ago. What we do, so think of it, remember when we went through that to create the install machine, we picked the OS, right? And then you could have where you picked prerequisites, right? So let's say I picked 2 prerequisites and the OS layer. What we would do, first step would be we'd have to merge those together into a layered image, right? Which means we would combine the layers together, combine the registry together, create a disk file, copy that disk file up, in this case to Zen server, use that to create the VM. So what the cache does, you go in where we had the connector and you put the cache amount in that we talked about before, it would leave that VM, that VHD already up there in the cache folder, so that the next time you went to use that same configuration, it could just clone it. It wouldn't have to merge it, create it, copy it up there and all that, right? So you'd save all that time of creating the VHD and pushing it up. You would just clone the one that was up there. So the caching just makes it a bit faster. Quite frankly, it's more important on vSphere because in vSphere we convert the disk type. We convert from VHD to VMDK. We push it up into vSphere. We then have to expand it to kind of a thick lazy zero disk. And that takes a lot longer, so the caching performance is much more important for vSphere than it is for Zen Server, because Zen Server is kind of native because it's still a VHD. But you can use caching in both, and it will speed up either one, but it'll speed up vSphere a lot more than it speeds up Zen Server.
Let's see. So what is the current status of that? It says running. Let's check it, huh?
Yeah, so what you probably want to do is go to your platform layer again, open the console, right? Because I'm sure that's rebooted and finished its install.
It has, yeah. This is it, yep.
Yep, so go ahead and log in. Probably just administrator is good. Right? Windows, it'll always do the local machine. Right?
I don't trust it. Uh-oh. Something's not right, though. Oh, you know what? It is. We never joined into the domain yet.
No, we haven't.
So it doesn't trust me. How about that?
It's always a trust.
Let's see. It's kind of wanting to keep going, so there must have been a component on there. So just cancel this, and I'll kick it back.
It installed
up.
RDS.
Oh, that's right. I forgot I was doing server hosted. So just keep talking amongst yourself while I get this taken care of.
So I got a question to Rob. So if, say I make a elastic layer, and say I make an elastic layer for Notepad++, and I assign that to a user on, and they're in a hosted shared situation like with Windows Server 2012. Would user A get it when they first logged on, and then user B see it also, even though it wasn't assigned to them?
No. Remember, it's by session ID, right? So you're only allowed to see it if you've been assigned it. What you would see, though, is if you went to the file system, so on our system, the C drive looks like all the layers together, like an amalgamation of them. So if you, first of all, if you let them see the C drive and they went to look at it, they'd actually see the folders, but none of the files, right? So the files wouldn't be visible to them, though folders would be, which could be important if you have some questionable name in your folder, but most of the time it shouldn't matter.
Okay, one more question around elastic layers. So say like I created the layer on Windows 10 as the OS layer, but it's elastic, so I assigned it to a 2016 server, or to a user that logged on to a 2016 server. Would they still get the application? Would it still work?
No, it wouldn't be mapped. And not only is it not mapped for that, if you had, for some reason, had 2 OS layers with Windows 10, it would only be mapped to the one you created it on.
And that's for layers as well as elastic layers, or just layers?
I was just asking about elastic layers.
It's everything, though, right? We tie the, remember, it's really important to, and other products don't do this, and we think it's a disservice to their customers. We tie the layer to the underlying OS because things break in really subtle ways, and unless you really test well, you might not even notice, because it could be that one little function breaks somewhere because there was some GUID that it remembered that's the wrong one when you get to a different OS layer. So you get some really strange problems if you don't tie them together.
All right.
Now, in the future, we think we might even do things where we have the assignments based on kind of like delivery group, where it's so that you can differentiate between what someone gets from one delivery group to another. Right now, if you have multiple 2016 session hosts that you have access to, if you log into them, you would get that on both. But that in the future, we might give you the ability to have policy to let you change that.
So I'm being a bad host here. It's like I didn't buy enough beer for everybody. But so right now I've got a little problem. This test machine has 2 gigs of memory, and then the Notepad machine wants 2 more gigs of memory, and this ELM server is using 8 gigs of my memory. So that's
okay. It'll sit there happily and wait till we're ready, right? we'll finish the one, and then it'll go away, and then we can start the other. So.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the do not wish to participate. Here's the platform layer, right? This is what that is, and I want to reboot it, right?
Correct. And then the last thing to do there is after you reboot and you come up, we want to join the domain, reboot, come back, and then we'll do that shutdown for finalized step.
Okay. And while we're doing that, let me just clean up a little bit of memory sharing here. Maybe I can get away with Rob and Peter to pay Paul a little later if I do this now. Uh-oh. It won't let me go that low. Okay. All right, we'll see what happens. All right, so anything else we can be working on? There's still more questions to be asked. I'm going to be joining, Rob, I'm going to go ahead and join the domain with this while you're maybe addressing another question or two. If David has a few, or Rob Shaw has some that have come in that have been enlightening and need to be addressed.
I got one. Hold on. All right, so as far as the user layer goes, is there any plan in the future to allow that to work on a server OS?
Yes. Yeah, so we expect it also to work on a session basis, right? And hopefully that'll be complete before the end of the year, right, and usable before the end of the year.
So is that going to replace User Profile Manager then?
Well, not really, because that lets you capture things. It doesn't let you set things, right? So you might decide, if you only use UPM to capture things and not really to define anything, you might use that, though UPM's a little different in that, the user layer is something that like to get it to work in DR is a little bit harder because it's going to be locked most of the time. So some people might choose not to use UPM. Certainly you'd want to use Workspace Manager either way, right? Because that'll let you set the settings you want to set versus, you know, one's policy based, one's just capturing settings. Right?
So that addresses. Go ahead, David.
Go ahead. I was going to say that the reason I was asking about that is because, you know, Windows 10 and Server 2016, they have that database for the start menu, and UPM completely screws that up because it can't capture it because there's a service running. So I'm wondering if
it's supposed to get better in the next version, though I haven't seen it yet. But yes, you know, that's the kind of thing that would get captured in a user layer. Here's the thing: once you enable the user layer, all of the user rights go into that. Right, so from a performance perspective, you definitely have to architect appropriately for that, right? You'll want that to be on all flash or hybrid storage, definitely over 10 gig networking, so that you don't hurt performance of the user. You know, even if you're doing caching, right, system will still use your cache disk or your cache and RAM, but the user stuff is not then going to do that. The user stuff is going to write to that disk file.
So that's essentially addressing the need to have, like, personal vDisk was limited to VDI only. Now we're talking about, you know, server-hosted XenApp workload desktops having personal vDisk like technology in it using this user layer, right?
Correct.
I think there seems to be a lot of questions about scale and redundancy, and so just keep in mind that Unidesk, that basically the Elm is a tool to create packages, right? And once we create the package, create the image that we pass off to the PBS server.
And do you want to do the shutdown for finalize there on the screen? Not just shut it down. Okay. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
Yeah. That we're out of band, right? So once you've passed that image off to PVS or whatever your composing provisioning tool is, you can turn off the appliance, and it would not prevent connections to your farm from happening. Additionally, think about if I'm talking to multiple domains. Again, we're not managing putting them into the domain. The provisioning tools are actually what are injecting these machines into the domain. We're just setting up some registry keys that we present as a base image.
Well, and keep in mind too, we're going to prove that in my lab, because in order to turn on the catalog we're going to create here in a few minutes, we're going to have to shut my the Elm server down because I don't have enough memory.
You're going to have to go back over to the console real quick to finish that task there, Andy.
Yeah. So what you want to do, Andy, before you start this, we'll start exactly. Thanks, David. You want to go into there, click on the OS layer, or the platform layer, sorry, and click on your platform layer.
And you're just telling me that so that I don't forget, right?
Well, we want it to start now because it takes a little while. So click on platform layer.
Okay.
You actually have to click on the layer. Click on it.
Oh, then click on the...
Yep. Then you can either right-click there or say finalize on the right. Either way, right? And then say finalize. So it's a two-step finalize process. You do the one in the VM, and the reason we put that in the VM is that'll actually check some things. It'll check if the VM has a reboot required. It'll check if NGen wasn't run for .NET applications. It'll tell you that right away, because otherwise we'd have to bring it all the way back down and then tell you you missed something. So we have that one that shuts it down, and then you come in here and say, yeah, I'm ready to finish it. Now you can go back and do your install on your other one. Right. And you saw what Andy did there. He looked at the task. The task will always give you the latest update on what's happening with it, right? So it's telling you exactly as it goes along what it does. So it's definitely always good to be looking at those tasks to see what they're doing if you're curious.
I don't know if this matters, but I'm changing it anyway.
I don't think you want to do that in the OS layer, or not OS layer, but the application layer.
You don't think I want to change the time to be what it's supposed to be, or does it matter?
Not in the.
I wouldn't do anything with
application.
the time and when you're packaging. Yeah, just.
Okay. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, is what you're saying, or will be.
What we're saying is we don't want to pollute the layer with that setting. Right?
Okay. Okay.
If you want to do a change like that, you'd want to do it in the OS layer. Right?
Okay.
So now you can just install your app. Yeah.
I don't need to join the domain with this one. I just install my app. That's it.
Not only do you not need to, you don't want to. And if you do have to join the domain, you have to unjoin it before you're done. So if you have an app that will only install as a domain, or you have to apply domain permissions to the folders or something, right? Sometimes that happens. You join the domain, you do whatever permissions or install you need to do, then you put it back in the work group, reboot, and then you finalize it.
Anything special about the install? You know, everybody on the phone probably, or the web, they're probably thinking, you know, change user install. Do I have to do any of that crazy stuff?
Not on 2012 R2. If you're doing 6.5 still, you would do, right?
Okay. All right.
Nothing, you know, no special rules on installing that you wouldn't have to do for whatever platform you're doing it.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, if you're doing IMA with 6.5 with older servers where you have to do change user install, you should still do it.
Okay. All right. So let's just go through this, right? Just take the defaults.
Just literally, yeah. Well, there's going to be one where it says, do you want to? Oh, this is an older version. Okay. Undo the auto updater. You never want to have an auto updater in the layer, right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. And then in a newer version, oh, actually, this is a new version. What happened to the little thing that says, do you want to put it in the profile or not? Did they remove that? Go back a little. This used to have a thing that said, do you want to put it in the profile or in program files? But I guess they took that away. Okay. And obviously, you don't want to install it in a profile because that's going to install into the admin profile, and it's not ever going to get to a user. You want to install into the program files.
Hey, Rob, did you, I've been busy reading some of these, so I haven't been able to listen in as well as I want to. Have you talked about what labs means in a in Unidesk arena, especially when we're talking about that user persistent layer?
Yeah, we did when we showed it. We were in there and we showed it. So yeah, that's what I was talking about. And you click that top button. You don't want to use app data.
So here's a good question. And if you're doing an app V guy, or if you're a Citrix app streaming guy, there was always this idea: do you want to run it once to try to populate the thing, or do you not want to run it? Does that matter here?
There's no sequencing concept in this or anything, so no, you don't need to do that. You also can't configure anything because almost every configuration, well, I shouldn't say that. If you configure something, if it's stored in a file or it's stored in HK current HK local machine, those things will be worked. But if it's installed in a user profile, it's not going to actually get to a user on the end. So from a setting standpoint, normally you just install it. You don't configure it. You configure using logon scripts, GPOs, and mandatory profiles or some other way.
Okay, so I hit finish here.
Yep.
And shut it down. We're going to run the.
So, yeah, you have to do that. Now, normally for me, in this case, you don't need it, right? So normally I always reboot one more time than it tells me just to make sure there's nothing, right, that's going to clear there. This I install all the time. I know you don't need to, so you can just do the shutdown.
Okay.
And you'll also notice that test desktop is gone now.
Oh, wow, took it away.
It did, and people ask us the Windows name on these machines is random. It's Unidesk something at random, and it maybe this, some of them may match, some of them might not match. There's really no rhyme or reason to it, but it's not going to be the same name every time, and it is totally dynamic. They're built and they're torn down.
So what do I do? I joined it to the domain earlier. What do I do about that AD account? Did it clean that up, or? I'd
go clean it up, right? You don't have to, but I normally do. Obviously, you could leave them out there, and it'll be the only one. The platform layers are the only ones usually that you join the domain in. So it's not like every layer is going to be in there. But
well, this is my demo lab. It's all going to get one nice reboot script here in a little bit, and it's all going to be gone. But that's good to know. Okay. All right. So back to the console, right?
Yeah.
And does this thing know that happened, or what's next?
Nope. Do you remember what you have to do?
Finalize.
You got it. That's it. Now stop there. So see the script path there? You have the ability to define a script that you put into the layer. So you could create a path in the layer, create a script. Let's say you have a script to license an Adobe product, right, using their serializer. Or you have a script of something that you want to run every time it goes onto a machine. You want to run a particular script. For instance, we have an Office activation script that I wrote that does all the things you need to do to activate Office when that machine gets attached to a session host the first time or a VDI desktop. You can put the path of the script you want to call in here, and on an elastic layer, it'll run that script after it mounts it the first time. And on a machine where it's already there on an image, it'll run those scripts from a boot script that we call when it boots up.
Okay. Hey, quick time check. We got about 20 minutes left, I think. And people, if you guys have more time, Rob and David and Rob, we'll stay on another 30 minutes or so. But we got about 19 minutes left on till 4 o'clock.
So we're doing pretty good. Say finalize.
And what I was just thinking is, I'll snapshot all this stuff back to where we get to at the end of the day, and we will we'll bring it. We'll do another one a month from now or so. We'll bring PBS into the mix so that people can join for PBS.
Sure. So do you have your DDC up? Were you able to start that, or do we not have enough RAM yet?
Well, no, we don't have it yet. Am I going to be? Well, I can start it now. Yes, I should be able to start it now.
Okay. Okay, so go back to our console. Let's do. Actually, we're all ready then. Click on images. We're ready to create our image, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Click on images. Say create template. So the idea behind images is I create a template, and I have one for every image. So each different configuration that you want to have, where you want to create a catalog and a delivery group for it, you'd have another image template. So in this case, MCS POC or whatever you want to, something like that. You'd probably name it, or POC MCS, however.
Okay.
Okay. Next, and you pick our operating system. Next. And do you want to use that elastically, or let's just put that in the image, right? I don't know if we'll have enough time to show elastic. Say next. Okay, now here we don't have a connector yet for MCS, so we want to say new. And pick the MCS connector for Zen server. Say new.
I don't know about the people listening, but I'm definitely going to have to go through the online classes. This is great. I'm learning a lot, but I'm learning a lot that I don't know. I'm learning that I don't know a lot, I guess is what I'm learning. So
first thing is there's a name for this connector all the way at the top, and it's always confusing the way it looks, right? And you'd want to say something like Zen Server MCS or your particular Zen server, because you could have different Zen environments and actually talk to different ones, right? Nice. I was going to say, I assume this needs to be like the root account or whatever.
Okay.
I know about Zen server could fit on a thimble. So.
Okay, what else here?
So pick you need a template, which will be the template for the master image. So I think we can probably use the same template that you created before. Right?
Okay.
And we don't need the cache, right? And so you can say test, and then save, and close. All right, and then pick it and say next. And take your platform layer, right? Next. And here's where you're defining the size of the layered image. So we don't want it to be 100 gig. We probably want it to be like 40 gig because we're not putting that much in it right now. So change that to 40.
Let's recap real quick. I've got my OS layer. I've got my platform layer. That's the one I put the VDA into. And then I've got my application layer, which is the third layer that I put the Notepad++ into.
Correct. And let's say you had 50 layers in your library. You only want 10 of them to go in here. You would just pick the ones you want to put in the image, right? You could use some elastically, some in the image, some not in this image at all, but in other images, right? So yeah, so we're going to say how big we want to make the disk, and then see the elastic layering there? That's important too. If you've in Labs turn that on, right, you can say, I don't want to use elastic layering. I want to use it just for applications, or I want to do it for applications and the user layer, right? Those are the options. You don't see the user layer here because we didn't enable it in Labs. We're going to say none right now because we're not doing elastic layering for now.
Okay, but I could have layering, and then my app layer would be an elastic layer, right?
You could, yep.
Okay.
But if you're going to do elastic layering, you have to enable it there in your image, or we won't even have our services installed to run it. Right?
And this says create template, but I'm assuming this is going to create my base disk for MCS, or is this going to create an actual template that I convert?
Just going to create a template. Say, go ahead and create that. And that's all you've done. Now what you do is click on it and say publish layered image on the right. Now, if you've got 10 of these, you can actually click on all 10 and say publish, and it'll publish all 10 of them, right? We actually publish 4 at a time so that we don't kind of overuse the infrastructure.
And is this actually, what is this doing?
It's got to create it first, so it's got to merge that stuff together, the platform layer, the Notepad++, and that. So once it's done merging it, it'll run it up. If you double click on the task, you'll see what it's doing.
So it's crunching right now, crunching all this together, and then it's going to push it out to the Zen server?
It's going to create a VHD, put the VHD on the storage, create a VM, and then try to start the VM. I don't know if it's going to start. We'll see.
Okay.
But basically what we're doing now is we're producing the master image VM that'll be used to create the catalog for MCS. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, something just of curiosity there, see the task down there at the bottom? There's like it says task and there's a ... next to it. If you click anywhere in that line where it says tasks, it'll clean up the old things, so you only see the current things. If you want to see the old things again, you click the second tab on the left where it shows checkboxes. Do you see that guy? All right, that'll show you your history. And you can go through, I think it's 180 days by default of history. The bottom two, see where it has like the 2 people there, one in a group. If you click on the first one, that's your stuff, right? And if you click on the second one, that's everybody's stuff, right? So when you have different users logging in here, you can say, I just want to see my stuff, I want to see everybody's stuff, or I want to see what's new or what's been previously run. That's what all those things are.
Okay. All right, so we're just kind of waiting on this to take place.
And this one takes a while, right?
Rob, when I was doing this with PBS, each time it creates a new VHD, and then I have to switch all my VMs over to that. Is there any plan to like make that do the versioning that PBS is normally doing? You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing. We can give you the beginnings of a script where you can have all your images use versioning, but they're still going to be full VHDs. We can't make a delta to make it an AVHD, right? Which is what would happen if you did a different version directly on the VDisk. But I could work with you if you're interested to make it look and use the promote and all that. Where we would basically, instead of bringing them in as separate VHDs, we would bring them in as another version on the same. That's just in PowerShell.
And guys, this is a primer, right? So there's lots of other questions. There's lots of things. Your Citrix SE, you can get up with them, and they can get you more information. They can help you with proof of concepts. This is just the icing. I should say icing on the cake. That's probably a bad analogy in this case. But certainly a conversation starter. We don't expect to be able to address everything on this POC, but we are going to do another one. We'll have another round, and maybe we can address some more questions there. Rob Shaw, while we're waiting on this, do you have additional questions from the forum?
Not necessarily more questions, but I will say for a lot of folks maybe who didn't have the conceptual piece of what Unidesk brings into Citrix with Citrix App Layering, I'd invite you to kind of look at some of the topical videos out on Unidesk.com that do especially the one that is what is Unidesk, and rather than where we kind of just jumped in with both feet into a POC, it hits the conceptual things like why is this beneficial? Because I think there's some of the questions have been, more conceptual in nature as opposed to, the deep dive type things.
Well, that's the challenge, right? I personally am a newbie to all this, and I've actually put my blinders on and didn't look much at Unidesk. One of the guys on my team did, but I was scared to look at it too much because I had so much other stuff going on. I didn't want to introduce yet another technology for me to have to know. But now that it's part of what I own as a Citrix guy, I don't have a choice. I've got to go learn it, and I've got to figure out where it fits and doesn't fit.
Yeah, and I think what we hear time and again from customers, and some of the folks that are on this forum today are current customers that are on the earlier versions of Unidesk looking at the latest. And I think for a lot of them, what I hear again and again from them is the more complex your environment, the better the benefit is. If you have 50 images, the ability to only have to manage your operating system update one time is worth the price of admission, and the price is no cost. So if you already own the product, it's pretty sweet.
Well, that's a good point. If you're a company that has 2 desktop images, you have two images, maybe 2 MCS catalogs, maybe 2 catalogs based off 1 disk image. Don't implement this just because it's there and you can and you own it. Implement it because it makes sense. Because but if you are a shop that has 10 different images, now all of a sudden this starts to make a lot of sense on how you can flatten that.
Yeah, and the real thing is if you were not implementing a bunch of use cases because they were too hard because you were going to have too many images, that's what this is trying to attack, right? It's trying to help you with, to make it universally usable for different use cases, especially on session, right? If you think about it with session.
Yeah, the session and the elastic, man, that's like a XenApp admin's dream, right?
Yeah, and that's, so I was a consultant back when SoftGrid came out, and I did a lot of SoftGrid, and our hope for that was that, right? You could have one image, right, and you could deliver everything dynamically. Just turned out there were so many applications not compatible, right, that it made it hard. Here, there's a very small number of applications that are not compatible. Most of them are compatible, so it makes it a little easier to use.
Yeah. Hey, so what would you expect on this layer here, the size? Can you kind of ballpark what? I mean, we've got 17 gigs roughly now. What do you think it's going to be?
Well, remember, it's going to be the OS, right, plus the platform layer, plus the other layers. So your OS is like 24 gig. The platform layer is probably like 2 gig or something, and that application layer is about 400 meg or 500 meg. Mm-hmm. And remember, too, in layers, it's not, you don't just get written files, you get deleted files and everything. It's a block level thing, so it's a little bigger than you would imagine it. So it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of 28 gigabytes before it's done.
So what do you think this is doing right now as far as resource contention? This is probably more disk related.
So when we first start, when we're doing a bunch of processing because we're merging the registry, right? Once that's done, then it's all disk related. Yeah.
There was a question about what apps are compatible. I think that might be a decent question for Rob. I think at least elastically, things that are deep filter driver or apps that have to be there at login certainly are things that are not going to be compatible with Elastic. But Rob, do you want to comment on the applications that you've
Sure.
seen that are not compatible with app layering?
Yeah. I talked about it a little earlier. So the couple things. So for Elastic layers, things that we said things that have third-party drivers, kernel drivers, early start services, dependent services, those types of things where they have to be there when the machine boots, those aren't viable for Elastic layers. Those you would put in the image. And we have something called Elastic Fit that tries to help you figure that out, right? It's kind of we try to help you decide if you have any of those things in there. As far as just standard applications, things that we know don't work, there's really not that many things that don't work with other filter drivers in Windows. So for instance, one of the ones that's always been a problem for Unidesk is the VMware profile management, right? The old RTO software. They didn't work properly in Windows. They went under Windows directly to the NTFS changelog. They didn't work with other filter drivers, so we couldn't work with them at all. Of course, they also didn't therefore work with antivirus either, so nothing would get scanned that was in your profile. So VMware bought a different product. That product works fine. If something hashes to the machine it's being installed on and stores the hash and then compares that when it's run, that's not good, right? That wouldn't work in PBS and that wouldn't work in us, right? Because it's going to actually hash to something on the installer machine and it's not actually going to run in when you put it on another machine. But most things in general, that don't work that way would be okay, right? From that.
You guys, question for you. The performance that we're seeing here, now my lab, this lab we're working on is just a laptop with some decent processor and a terabyte SSD drive. Is this relatively what we would expect the time to take, or do you guys on server class systems see this maybe half the time that we're looking at here?
It'll be less than half the time. I mean, you know, if you have 10 gig networking and flash storage, it takes probably around 5 or 6 minutes to do this publish.
Yeah, mine happens a lot faster on my Dell R810.
So you guys are making fun of my 5-year-old laptop? Is that what we're doing?
Yep.
Basically, yeah.
Well, but that's a good point, right? You guys, you Citrix admins, right? You guys can lab this up on an old server, throw an SSD drive in it, and yeah, I mean, old laptop, and you know, this. I talk to people all the time about that are just confused. They can't do all this stuff. Well, you can. It doesn't take just throw some memory in a desktop and make it happen.
Yeah.
There's really no excuse not to have lab machines.
You can do it. Hypervisors obviously like server class machines better, right? But you can do it. Everything just takes a little longer, right? You have to be willing to wait longer when you're doing it on, you know, even I have a pretty nice lab, still not super fast because I don't have 10 gig networking in my lab. That would be nice, but I don't have it. So things that customers do in 5 minutes takes me 12 minutes, you know, that kind of thing.
Rob Shaw, any other topics that have come up while we're waiting? I think we're almost done here, but any other topics that have come up that you want to flush out while we've got people on the hook here for another minute or so?
So I know some folks asked if it was, if there are videos, if there's training, if there are connections to Twitter handles, that kind of thing. I think it is recorded. I believe that was mentioned before. As far as, you know, some of the training, there are some decent trainings. If you go to unidesk.com right now, that of course will roll inside of Citrix. Additionally, I know that some of the training folks are aligning to try and get you know, current training and certifications. Nothing will really go forward until we have the new branded solution. But that some of those groups are starting to align.
All right, waiting for the virtual machine. What does that mean? Oh, there it is. It's over there on the left. So what does it do? Boots it up and does some magic with it?
Yeah, so what has to happen for MCS, the machine needs to boot up. We've got to make sure it comes up. It needs to activate, right? Otherwise MCS won't work, right? So it needs to get activated. If you're doing Office needs to activate or MCS won't work right. Nothing to do with Unidesk, right? Just the way MCS works. So normally it'll boot up and it'll run any of those scripts that were defined in the layers, right? If they're, you know, activation scripts and all that. And then what you have to do is, in this version, you have to actually go and after it's all booted up and it's happy, you got to do a shutdown. In the next version that comes out, it's going to automatically wait for it to come all up and then it'll do a shutdown.
So I wanted to point this out real quick. It looks like it just, like all those layers, those 3 layers that we just took, it crunched those together and pushed out a single vDisk with those layers all meshed together properly, right?
Correct. That's that merge, right, where we merge it all together. So it's just a normal VM, right? That's all you're getting there. Nothing that, and we didn't do the elastic layering, so it doesn't even have the Unidesk filter driver in it, right? It's just a regular VM.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for just the basic layering for XenApp servers, this is potentially huge, and I can go back later and add additional apps to it just by redoing what we just did with an additional app layer, right?
You just modify the template, add whatever apps you want, and change the versions, right? If you patched apps, you could add the versions to them, and then you publish again, and you get a different VM, and then you go to your catalog and you say update, and you pick the new VM instead of the old one.
Okay.
So here you just want to log in and then shut it down.
And again, the point for me, the point for it coming up and me logging in is just to finish things out. Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah. Now I'm curious. In your lab, do you have activation?
I do not have any form of KMS or MAK.
Okay. So then I'm not sure MCS will work right, but we can try it. You didn't create an account for this, right? You're gonna have to log in as administrator and. Right.
So local admin?
Yeah.
So I know this question's come up a few times, and I thought I'd ask you, Rob, if you want to comment on it. What's the maximum number of app layers you can create? I haven't heard of a max.
Create or put somewhere?
Well, I think
I don't think you. No, you don't.
Both questions, right? This question is.
Want to shut down?
Andy, don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you
cancel? Yeah. just want to shut down at this point.
Okay, so when I create my catalog, it's going to create my AD accounts.
Right. This is just the master VM, right? Now, what I don't know is because it's not activated, I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll try it. I've never done it not activated in MCS, but
it will. It'll work fine, I think.
Okay.
So what I do want to do now, I think, though, well, I need to bring
Go
up
back. Let this shut down first because it's going to finish that in our appliance. Once that's finished, then we can shut down the appliance. So let's just wait for that to finish. We're watching now, so when that machine shuts down, we'll finish that task.
Okay.
Rob, what were you saying? Sorry.
So Rob Z,
just max number of applications you can create and max number of applications you can assign.
So there's really no max number that you can create. So now you can shut down the appliance. You're okay there. You can create as many app layers as you want, right? We're just storing them in a store. Elastic layers, the limit on any one machine to connect elastic layers is the Microsoft limit for how many it can mount, which is 2,028 per machine, which is obviously not practical, right? There's going to be a much smaller number than that that's practical to use. The max number of layers that we'll let you include in a layered image is 200, which is just arbitrary. We pick that number, but we don't expect anybody to ever use that many. So.
All right, so you guys good with me creating a catalog just like I always would here?
Yep. And just when you pick your master image, you pick that VM. That's it. Now, David said something before, but if people were asking about PBS, in PBS, we would have installed the Pbs Agent. We have a connector, so when we publish, it actually comes into PBS as a vdisk, and it looks the same. It's got the image name and then the date timestamp as the vdisk, and then you just apply that vdisk to the targets. You can create targets with it or apply it to existing targets. If you modify it and you republish, you get a new vdisk with the same image name and a new date timestamp. And that's what David was talking about. It's a little different than versions because it doesn't show up as a different version, but you could use a PowerShell script that would change it to look like a version. And David, one other thing you might be interested in, I wrote a utility that lets you manage your images, and what it'll do is let you pick an image, it'll show you which targets, and it'll let you apply your image to the selected targets, right? So you might find that interesting as well.
Yeah, I wrote one of those too.
Yeah, Mr. Ott, if you need something, Mr. Ott can usually write you something. So I have no idea why this is performing so badly. Oh, wait a minute. Now I know why it's performing so badly. I'm actually, so give myself a break because somebody might give me a hard time about this, but I'm moving. So my other laptop, which is the other 16 gigs of memory I have for my lab, is in a box right now. And I went to prepare for this week. And I was like, oh, I don't know where that box is. So I'm limited to one server at the moment, which is not helping my cause here with trying to boot up and get into Studio. But it will happen here in a second. Come on. And so our next step here, right, is we're just going to go through and create a catalog just like we always do for MCS based on 2012, server catalog, and then we'll create a delivery group, and then we'll log into that, and we'll be happily, using our XenApp, our server-hosted environment.
Yep.
I got a question for you for MCS because that machine, that MCS machine there, is going to be used for the base image. If I go and update the image through the Unidesk appliance, is it going to keep the same name?
No, it's going to create another VM that has the same image name, so whatever the image template name is, with the new date timestamp.
So then would you have to go back into to the delivery
Go to
controller?
your catalog and say update, and then you pick instead of picking a different snapshot, you're going to pick the different VM.
Okay.
And then you can delete once usually you'll keep the previous one. So you'll go like 3232, right? And then always delete the oldest one so that you're not keeping so many VMs laying around.
All right. So I'm not sure why. Anyway, we'll see what happens here. Oh, there we go. It's all good. So we're going to create a server catalog using MCS. And we are going to pick that MCS, this guy.
Yep.
And let's just go ahead and create 5, but I'm only going to power up 1. I don't want to do any of this right now.
And all those configuration things, however you want to do them, right? Whatever you want to do as part of your Citrix environment, there's nothing special that we would impose on how you configure them.
Right.
And did you do the group policy to set domain admins as local administrators and domain users as remote desktop users?
No, I haven't done any of that right now.
That's good to know, though. So with the Unidesk technology, the only place we can modify the local SAM database, so the Windows account management database, is in the OS layer. Since we install the VDA in the platform layer, you do need a GPO that defines your local administrators to whatever group you want to use, if it's a Citrix group or domain admins or whatever, because it's not going to get there from that install. Right? The other thing is we join the domain in that platform layer, which means domain admins is not going to get into the administrator group unless you do it through a GPO.
That's okay. Okay, that makes sense. That's really good to point out then. I thought David was just trying to be the smart guy. I'm just kidding.
He is.
That's another thing about David too.
In
You
the
tell
true
him,
sense of the word.
tell him to go test some stuff out. He'll really like go dig into it. I don't know if his boss knows all that, but I'm just kidding. All right, so as you can see, my Zen server here is doing a little bit of work. That's the copying. That's the PVS part of this. And you know, we did talk coming into this that this is a proof of concept. We're willing to do this all online, real time. So again, we're going to have another moment.
MCS is involved, right? Because it's going to create the replica disk first, right, and then try to create the machines from the replica disk. And,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and so we can take a few minutes to talk through that for some folks. So the way MCS works, right, so it's going to take the base, it's going to make a copy, it's going to make a snapshot. So we can look here and look. We're going to find that there's a snapshot that was created. From that snapshot, it's going to create a replica disk that's going to be the base disk for all of our images that get spun up here. And one of the next things we're going to see here is a temporary machine will pop up, and it'll be prepped a little bit. And then we'll move on and actually have the catalog creation of the 5 machines that I told it to create. But we are right now crunching a lot of disk I/O, so it's taking care of making that replica or that base disk.
What happens to your
If
Nutanix
spreading it
block?
across different storage, it would be making multiple copies, right?
So the Nutanix box is sitting in a box for a demo tomorrow. My wife's not a big fan of having me sitting that out all the time. Okay, so now's a good time, guys. If there's other questions, let's see. We lost a few people. We still have 183 people on, so there's certainly some more questions to be brought up, things to talk through. And then Rob Z, if you have any other things you want to share, I think our target's to jump off here about by 4:30, so we've got a little bit of time left. So anything else you want to bring up or share?
I do see a question there that I get asked a lot, right? And that's that I use SCCM. How would I use this with SCCM? And I'll tell you at this time, it's not really designed for SCCM because remember the install machines are not domain joined by default. So you can use SCCM, but I find it would probably be easier to use the source for SCCM rather than SCCM itself if you wanted to, and actually use whatever they're using in SCCM. The MSIs would have you create a layer, run that to install in it. To use SCCM, you have to you'd create an SCCM layer. You'd have to seal up the SCCM layer, which means remove its GUID information and all that. So every time it comes up new and registers with the SCCM infrastructure. You'd have to add that as a prerequisite when you created your install machine, add that machine to the domain. Now you could script this, right, but add the machine to the domain, have it push down the application, but at the end you'd have to remove it from the domain and remove SCCM, so it's a bit complicated to try to use SCCM to deliver applications into layers. It wasn't really designed for that. We are working on creating PowerShell commandlets where you could possibly automate that entire process, right, with that, but those aren't available yet. We're hoping they'll be available later this year for you to do something like that.
So we're moving along here. The prep VM is actually up and running, and that will be our next the next step in the MCS process. It's bringing that up to be able to basically clean it up and make it available to be part of the catalog. So we're getting close. Only a few, probably a minute or so left.
Or 5.
So someone asked about VHDX support for PBS in the future. We hope so. That we use an open source utility to create the VHD files, and they don't yet support VHDX, so we might have to write that. But we do hope at some point to use VHDX.
So I think what we'll do is as soon as we get this up and we create a delivery group and we show that we do have a functioning machine with the layers obviously together, and we can do that a couple ways. To help some of the folks that might be ready to jump off in a second, we can go ahead and just log into the actual machine and show that it's there, and that the one of the 5 machines, and show that the layers are there, the app's there, the VDA is obviously there. It had to be just now, or that script, that preparation thing wouldn't have worked. But we should be able to in a minute show that.
I guess something that's come up a lot is how do I get my hands on it? And I think we've touched on this a little bit, but just to let you know, I mean, there are some folks that had downloaded in the past, and those evals would have expired. Folks that are licensed and entitled to the solution. Yeah, they could reach out to us and we can get those turned on again.
So for the sake of time, let's do this. I'm going to power up one of these guys, and let's jump into it and see what it actually looks like in terms of the layers all coming together and functioning properly. And while I'm doing that, I might take this guy and edit him and give him a little more memory and see if that helps our story some.
So while you're doing that, quick answer for Russ, who asked about running the N10 builder. Since we don't build desktops anymore in this version, you don't need to run the N10 builder. What you do need to do is for proper activation, if you're using PBS, you do have to run something called setkms version, which creates a script file to activate Windows. And you could use the N10 for that still, but it's not going to use the N10 file because we're not actually running setup anymore. For VMware View environments that might run setup, you could use it, but I don't think most of them do.
All right, so while that machine's coming up, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to create a proof of concept delivery group. I'll just put one machine in it, and we won't worry about. I got a question for. Let's don't worry about that right now. I have a bunch of questions. I better not deviate, or I'll ruin it.
You're not going to be able to log on to it if that's what you're trying to do.
I'm not going to be able to log into what?
If you're going to try an ICA session, you're not going to be able to because the remote desktop users isn't populated.
What if I log in as an admin, though?
Again, domain admin isn't in the administrators group yet.
Local admins isn't in the administrator group, but it's a domain member?
No, local admins is, but domain admins is not.
If you log in on the console as an admin, you'll get in. That's probably what you want to do.
Well, that's what I'm going to show here, just to show that the layers came together and it did work.
You could then add an account to the local admins if you want, and then try it. But.
Okay.
So someone asked, what's the minimum requirement for Unidesk for SQL, etc.? We don't use SQL. We use MySQL. The appliance comes pre-configured with 4 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Is there a way to cluster that?
You don't want to change any of that, by the way.
Is there a way to cluster that for redundancy?
There's no reason to, really. because remember, it doesn't really matter if it's running or not. It doesn't stop anything. But usually a backup is what is better. But you could. It's just an appliance. It's a virtual machine, so you could use VMware High Availability or Hyper-V replicas or whatever is appropriate for your environment, Zerto or whatever.
So let me just go through this just to prove that what you guys are saying is right. I'm still a little confused. So here's my storefront login. I've got this machine's up. I just don't understand why I can't see the console. It's got to be something with the presentation protocol of the VNC here.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I'm not used to Zen Server with MCS.
We've gone through all this without any problems, and then that.
Well, wouldn't be a POC without any problems.
Do you have it set to automatically do RDP?
I don't know.
Their console might use RDP, right?
Well, by default, Zen Center will try to use RDP if it can.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, here I think I'm proving you guys wrong. This is the machine right here. Then I was able to ICA into it.
You shouldn't be able to.
Don't know if I should be or not, but let's see. Here it is, and it works. So I mean,
Go into a managed computer and see. Maybe you did have a GPO for that.
No, I don't have a GPO. It's just the way Citrix installs and does the RDS. Now this will work. Anyway, so local groups. Right here, nothing there. Huh. Well, I'm in. I don't exactly understand why, but it is working. And so here's our ta-da moment, right? So for those of you guys still on the phone, we're here. We've got this machine. It's up and running. Notepad and lots of things I could do from here to go up and adjust. Add. I could update the whole thing again. And so Rob, walk me through that. So if I wanted to add another app to this, what would I do?
So you know what? Why don't do you want to transfer to me and I can show you on my environment?
Sure.
Let's do that. Since, because you have your appliance down, right? So we won't be able to show.
Right. Okay, so we must be doing something right. We're about 2.5 hours into this thing, and we got 164 people still hanging out with us. So hopefully people are getting good information from this.
Okay, so you have your image templates, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to modify something to add an application to it, so let me, this is my Zen app one, right? I would say I want to edit my template. Go to application assignment, and I could pick any other application that I don't have in there, right? If I want to add Gimbit to it and just add it, right? This is what versions look like, right? So I had this version, then I patched it, right? So if I was going to add Firefox to this, I could add either of those versions, right, into that. By selecting those two things, if I do save, all I have to do to republish it is say publish layered image, and it's going to push it up to my Pbs server, right? Now, since I'm in here now, I can show people real quick what Pbs looks like.
And after you push it up to Pbs, though, then you have to go in and swap it out with the boot target devices.
What it's going to do is create another. See, these are what it looks like in PVS. You have the name of your image, so mine's Desktop Win7 P64, and then the date timestamp. Just like in MCS, we had the date timestamp for each VM. Here it's for each vdisk, right? So I'm publishing now, so I'm going to get a new one of these, right? And if I want to apply that, I either go into the target or I drag and drop it. You recreate the vdisk. You manage it the same way that you would normally within here. You can drag it over to a collection and update it, or you can go into particular targets and change them, right? Or as I was saying before, when David and I were talking, I wrote a little utility that'll let you change it, because what we don't have by default is that promote, right? You can't just go into a single vdisk and say you want to add a version to it modify it and promote it. Though we can make these, when we add in the vDisks, we can make them look like they're all all the ones in the same one are part of the same disk, just different versions, and then you can use promote. That's some PowerShell where we're just trying to fool it into thinking our different vDisks are different versions of the same vDisk.
Right. Hey, this has been great. I think we're probably to a point where we kind of want to wrap it up, and if people want to, if they want us to do another series where we do it a lot of this all over again, we'll go from here and maybe do it and do one from PBS, from scratch. But you have any parting things you want to talk through, Rob or David?
I mean, I think just think about the advantages. This is all about flexibility for you, right? To be able to have an easier way to manage both images, the operating systems, the applications. It's not for everybody, I don't think, right? I'd love for it to be for everybody, but I think you were right before, Andy, when you said if you have one image that you manage, I don't know that this is going to save you time, but most places don't have that, right? So if you're really looking for more flexibility, a way to manage both XenApp and XenDesktop together, all from one platform, definitely look at it. I think you'll find it pretty interesting and very powerful.
No, thanks. Rob Shaw, anything you want to add?
Nope, I think actually the questions are still rolling in, but we'll continue to answer them.
Okay. And David, I appreciate you jumping on, and you had a lot of valuable input and some things to add in terms of some of the technical pieces as well. Anything you want to share before we take off here?
Not really. I think I said it in the chat. I didn't know anything about Unidesk a couple weeks ago aside from the name of it. Didn't know what it did. And everything I learned about it thus far has been just through the Unidesk site and their videos, and of course this.
And I think you would have to agree that the fact that Citrix has bought it, which is great. I mean, you can't give Citrix enough kudos for buying this and making it part of the product and not holding us hostage over it. That's awesome. But now that it's part of the product and you don't have to go to your manager and ask for more money for it, it's kind of a no-brainer. You got to learn it, right? You got to add this skill set to your toolbox. So maybe that's my parting shot. Maybe that's my little bit to leave on there. But I appreciate you guys joining. Stephanie, are you still with us?
I'm right here.
Anything you want to add to that?
Just want to let everyone know I put a link to a forum thread at mycugc.org where you can ask more questions and you can talk about this presentation, and we'll make sure that those questions go to the right people. Also, I'm going to do my best. I have a transcript of all the questions that were asked today, and I will try to condense those down and put those in that same forum thread for you. And you can also watch the recording, and I'll make sure you all get a link to that. So that should go out later today or tomorrow morning. And finally, I put a link in the chat window to a very short survey. We love to get your feedback. It helps us plan future webinars like this one. And that's pretty much it from me. I want to thank everybody who was involved. And Andy, I know you said you wanted to make this a series, and we'd love to have it. So looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, if people will let us know what they want to see. I mean, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do it once a month, but who has time for that? But maybe. But I would like to do this once a quarter for sure, where we get some product within the Citrix set. There's plenty of people out trying to sell you third-party stuff, right? But now, like Unidesk, it's part of Citrix. Let's have some lab it up sessions on Citrix technologies that are part of the suite that most people own. And let me know what you want to do. And I have a little promo. Me and some other guys are going to start doing a blog, not a blog, but a podcast once a week where we take the Citrix blogs from the week before or so and trying to get that out as well. So we're working on a few things, trying to build within the community, in addition to the community. So anything anyone wants to share and get back to me on, that would be excellent.
All right, are we ready to close out then?
Yeah, I guess with that, we'll call it a day. We'll call it 2.5 hours worth, and until next time, thanks guys.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye everyone.